Araw po sa lahat. Narito po tayo ulit sa ating Linangan, the GE Faculty Development Program. And today, we're going to have our first webinar on the theme Disaster Risk Management. And we called it, Are We Ready? The Role of GE in Disaster Risk Reduction and Management. Today, we have a very interdisciplinary lineup, beginning with our opening remarks with Sir Benny Pacheco from Civil Engineering, followed by Ma'am May Tatuin from the Department of Arts Studies. We also have Ma'am Jenny Ramos from the National Institute of Geological Sciences. And our moderator for today is Sir Alan Vera from the Department of Community Development. So before we proceed, before I introduce our moderator, I would like to remind everyone of our guidelines, no? So please use the Q&A box for your questions. Use our chat box with prudence. So please keep this webinar a safe space. Okay. You may type your questions in the live chat as well, but it's better to have everything centralized in the Q&A box. And in order to receive a certificate, you'll have to fill out the evaluation form, which will be sent out by the end of the webinar. So we will be receiving instructions throughout the webinar. Yun lang po. At hindi ko na po papatagalin. Introduce ko po si Sir Alan Vera. So Assistant Professor Cesar Alan Vera is a faculty member of the Department of Community Development of the UP College of Social Work and Community Development. He has degrees in MS Environmental Studies and BS Mechanical Engineering. He spent more than 3 decades in community development work before entering the academy. He has served as country manager of the Christian Aid Philippine Program, co-lead convener of the Philippine International NGO Network, center coordinator of the community-based Natural Resource Management Learning Center, chairperson of the NGOs for Fisheries Reform, and Executive Director of Sentro para sa Kaiunlad ng Katutubong Agham at Teknolohiya. He has been involved in several programs and projects, advocacies, and research on community-based disaster risk reduction, humanitarian action, and locally led disaster response, community-based coastal resource management, fisheries policies and trade liberalization, community livelihoods, gender mainstreaming, and organization development of civil society organizations. So he is, in fact, the best moderator for our webinar today. Everyone, please give a warm round of digital applause to Assistant Professor Cesar Alan Vera.
Maraming salamat, Ma'am Ana. Magandang Monday morning sa ating mga panelists at higit na 400 ang ating mga attendees. Sa webinar na ito, ng General Education Center na pinamagatang Are We Ready? The Role of GE in Disaster Risk Reduction and Management. Napapanahon ng ating paksa dahil ang Pilipinas ay isa parati sa mga bansang pinakamatasang risko sa disaster. Magandang oportunidad ito para himayin natin ang mga piling GE courses, yung DRMAPS at Geology 1, at baka panayam ang mga nagtuturo nito para maintindihan natin ang role ng GE sa DRR. Bago magsimula, mga ilang house rules and reminders ulit, nabanggit na ito pero paalala lang, we may use the Zoom's Q&A function to ask questions during the open forum. Those who are watching the webinar from YouTube may type in their questions using the live chat. Let's exercise prudence and respect as we type in the chat box. All chats will be recorded, and especially those for everyone. Think before we click. In order to receive a certificate, please answer the evaluation form, of which the link will be flashing before the webinar ends. Salamat. Okay. Ang magbibigay sa pambungad na pananalita ay si Dr. Benny Pacheco. Si Dr. Benny ay Professor Emeritus ng Institute of Civil Engineering sa UP Diliman. Siya ay National Academician at kasapi ng National Academy of Science and Technology sa Dibisyon ng Engineering Sciences and Technology. Sa Japan naman, siya ay Honorary Fellow ng School of Engineering ng University of Tokyo. Sa Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers, dati siyang pambansang pangulo at ngayon ay chairman ng Specialty Division for Civil Engineering Education at chairman ng National Special Committee on Strategic Foresight. Sa Association of Structural Engineers of the Philippines, dati siyang pangulo at ngayon ay chairman ng Committee on Earthquake, Recording, Instrumentation, and Structural Health Monitoring. Naglingkod rin si Dr. Pacheco sa UP System bilang tagapagtatag ng Executive Director ng Resilience Institute of the UP System for Disaster Risk Reduction and Management. Naglingkod rin si Dr. Benny sa UP Diliman bilang Vice Chancellor para sa gawaing pang-akademiko. Noong 2016, sa kanyang termino ay naitatag ang General Education Center, Diliman. At mula naman 2013 hanggang 2024 ay kasapi si Dr. Pacheco ng pangkat na mga guro mula sa iba't ibang kolehiyo ng UP Diliman na nagpasimula sa kursong pang-GE na ngayon ay tinatawag na DRMAPS, Disaster Risk Mitigation, Adaptation, and Preparedness Strategies. Tayo pong welcome si Dr. Benny.
Maraming salamat, Prof. Pera. Naririnig siguro po ako ng lahat. Maraming salamat sa G Center Diliman sa pag-oorganisa at pag-imbita para sa araw na ito. At maraming salamat sa lahat ng dumadalo virtually, online. Huwag po kayong alis hanggang alas 4 ng hapon o kahit hanggang alas 12 o alauna. Marami tayong maaaring pag-usapan. Naganda rin po ako ng ilang slides dahil di ba sa pagtuturo po natin ng GE, nakikita nating pare-parehong may halaga yung ating pagsasalita, paggalaw, pagpapakita ng ilang visual sa slides, at mag-iiwan dito ng ilang tanong para mapag-isipan natin habang nakikinig sa dalawang resource speakers nating susunod. Nagkataon po ng mga resource speakers natin susunod ay mga kakilala ko rin, kaya maganda siguro sa bandang dulo ng Q&A, ring magkaabot-abot, magkahalo-halo ang ating mga katanungan, kakayanin po natin yan. Pagkapatuloy po natin, hindi nyo lang nalalaman, dito sa opisina ay nag-disaster risk management din tayo sa teknolohiya. Kagaya nga po nasabi ko, meron tayo lang slides para sa pagtanaw ay mas maalala natin kung ano nga ba ang ating gustong marinig, mapag-isipan, mapag-usapan ngayong umaga. Ang unang-una po nating katanungan ay, are we ready? Siyempre, ang kailalim na tanong niyan ay, sino ba tayo? Who are we? Ngayong umaga, tayo yung mga guro, instructors, professors ng general education. Maaari namang napakabata kagaya ko, o mas senior na kagaya ni John na kasama namin dito. Ano man ang ating edad, nakahanda tayong tumulong magturo ng GE dahil general education. Pero ang talagang we, sa palagay ko, sa tanong na are we ready, hindi lamang tayong mga guro dahil marami nga tayong pinag-aaralan, pakikinggan pa ngayon sa pedagogy, sabi nga, sa how. Pero mukhang kailangan din nating ihanda ang motivation ng ating mga learners. Sa bagay, tayo rin learners. We have to learn before we would teach. At lalo na, siguro kailangan din natin paghandaan kung paano ang motivation ng ating fellow citizens dahil itong GE, sabi nga, hindi ito para sa isang major na kurso. Hindi ako nag-aaral ng GE para maging enhinyero mismo. Nag-aaral ako ng GE para maging citizen, hindi po ba? Kaya mukhang kailangan din natin pag-isipan, pag-usapan, paano nga ba ang motivation ng ating fellow citizens para maging ready. Yung disaster risk reduction and management, pinaalala ko lamang po, ang focus talaga ng ating gustong i-manage ay yung risk. Yung bago pa mangyari ang anumang disaster, sana kaunti na lang ang aktual na disaster. Meron pa rin dahil hindi zero, pero karamihan ng ating gustong matutunang i-manage ay yung risk, yung banta. Kahit nga po sa ating national law, yung Republic Act 10121, I think 2011 ito na ipasa. Kahit doon ay kinikilala na maging ang ating budget, o meaning ang ating mga inisyatibo para sa disaster risk reduction and management, ay sana 30% na lamang na disaster response. Yung pag nangyari na, paano tutugon. Sana yung karamihan, 70% ng ating initiatives, pati budget, yung ating pag-aalala, pag-aasikaso, nakatutok sa risk habang nakaamba pa lang, proactive. 70% proactive, 30% reactive. 70% risk ang perspective, 30% na lamang sana yung disaster na kailangan natin pag-isipan, pag-usapan. Ito po ay isang pahinang galing lamang sa National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Plan ng Pilipinas, in-update at ang coverage hanggang sa taong 2030, sinasabay sa mga SDG goals. Maganda po yung mga kulay, ano? Berde, asul, pula, dilaw. Ang tutok ko kanina ay yung berde. Yung berde at asul halos magkasama, 70%. Yung pula at dilaw halos magkasama, 30% na lamang. At mula sa pizza pie doon sa kaliwa sa ilalim, na parang equal-equal lang, sinasabing sana ma-develop ito na kaunti lang yung pula at dilaw. Sa madaling salita, sana mapag-isipan natin habang nakikinig sa ating dalawang resource speakers mamaya na risk ang ating tutok at risk factors. At yan namang risk factors ay paano ba nangyayari kung ito po ay overlapping or coincidence ng tatlong main factors. Sa kanan, sa kaliwa, hazard. Maaaring ito yung lindol, ito yung bagyo, ito yung malakas na hangin. Sa taas sa kanan, yung exposure. Kung may tao, may bahay, may bagay, may businesses na naka-expose dun sa hazard. At pangatlo, vulnerability. Kung yung ating mga tao mahina o kabado, yung ating mga bahay mahina o baka masisira, yung ating mga business delikado na baka maapektuhan ng bagyo o ng hangin, may vulnerability. Pag nagpatong-patong silang tatlo, yun po yung risk, ano? Pero ang risk ay hindi pa rin disaster. Banta pa lang ng disaster. Kaya sana, habang nakabanta pa lang yung hazard, yung exposure, yung vulnerability, at magpatong-patong man sila na nakahamba, nakabanta na risk, ay mapag-aralan natin, matutunan natin kung paano i-manage. Sa totoo lang, hindi ito theoretical. Kaya nga po sabi ko, mga fellow citizens talaga ang kailangan maihanda natin. Kaya general topic talaga ito. Kahit doon sa batas ng 10121, kinikilala kung ang apat na vice chair ng National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, pati yung mga counterpart ng mga lokal. Ang isa dyan ay nasa Disaster Prevention and Mitigation, lead raw ang DOST. At down the line, you can see sa Disaster Rehabilitation and Recovery, lead daw agency ang NEDA. Alam niyo po, 10 taon, 15 taon, pinag-uusap-usapan na baka isang mainam na matutunan sa DRRM, sa eskwelahan man, sa GE man, o sa labas man, sa aplikasyon, hindi po ba? Knowledge ay important or concepts. Skills ay important din paano gawain. Pero values o pagpapahalaga ay equally important din. Sana po isipin natin, kung pinahahalagahan natin equally, sabay-sabay, yung mga factors ng hazard, exposure, vulnerability, at yung katambal ng vulnerability na capacity, sana lahat ng ito tutukan natin sabay-sabay, hindi yung parang naghihintayin tayo na pag may tumama ng disaster, saka magre-response. Pag may nasira na, saka magre-rehab. Kaya po sa Pilipino, yung pagkaunawa natin sa mga konsepto, importante. Yung paggawa natin, yung skills, paano ito i-implement, at yung pagpapahalaga natin sa lahat ng ito para hindi baliwalain. Lahat ng yan ay GE, di po ba? Knowledge, skills, values, pagkaunawa, paggawa, pagpapahalaga. So sa madaling salita, ang tanong po talaga natin, are we ready? Paano po maging ready? Ready magturo, pero bago maging ready magturo, ready rin tayong mag-aral pa. Hindi naman tayo naaralan nung at tayo undergraduate pa. So sana tayo ay ready para mag-acquire ng more concepts and knowledge or magpare-pareho tayo ng pagkaunawa. Sana tayo ay ready with the skills kung paano ito isagawa ng sistematiko. At sana ay ready tayo sa pagpapahalaga, bigang halaga lahat ng factors ng risk. Sabay-sabay, hindi yung naghihintayan. Pag may disaster na, saka magre-response. Kaya nga po, proactive tayo. Pakinggan natin ang ating dalawang resource speakers at marami tayo pong pwedeng pag-usapan maya-maya hanggang alas 4 ng hapon o hanggang alas 12 ng tanghali. Maraming salamat po at enjoy the lectures.
Ayun. Ready na po kami, Dr. Benny. Maraming salamat. Napakagandang pang-level off ng kahulugan ng risk at disaster risk reduction, ng paglatag ng national frameworks at pagpapalala na tumutok tayo dapat sa berding bahaging ito na nakatuon sa disaster preparedness at mitigation. Ulit bigyan natin ng masigabong online palakpakan si Dr. Benny Pacheco. Simulan na po tayo sa ating unang paksa. Ang ating unang paksa ay tungkol sa kursong Disaster Risk Mitigation, Adaptation and Preparedness Strategies or DRMAPS na tatalakayin ni Dr. Flodette May Datwin or si Dr. May. Si Dr. May ay professor ng Department of Art Studies, College of Arts and Letters, University of the Philippines. Dr. May teaches graduate and undergraduate courses on art and society, art theory and aesthetics, art history, and art criticism. She is also a senior editor who led in reviving the Art Studies Journal. She wrote numerous publications in national and international publications. Her first book on Filipino artists in the visual arts from the 19th century to the 90s emerged from her engagement with women artists in the Philippines and Asia. From her research on women artists in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, South Korea, and Japan, she curated and organized exhibitions and forums. Her current research and pedagogical interests include gender issues in the arts, art and ecology, and art and healing. In her most recent writings and engagements, she is veering towards interdisciplinary methods and pedagogy. She is founding member of a team that teaches an interdisciplinary course on DRMAPS based at the College of Engineering. Let's all welcome Dr. May Datwin. Dr. May?
Yes, good morning. I'll just share my screen. Nakikita ninyo?
Nakikita na po.
Okay. Wait lang ha. May technical issue din. Sige po. Dali lang po. Okay. So, maraming salamat, GE Center, Ma'am Anna and Ma'am Alan sa inyong mga introductions and syempre sa napakagandang leveling of expectations ni Dr. Pacheco. Sige po, umpisahan ko na po para mas marami tayong maging laman or maging oras para sa Q&A later. Kung hindi man after kung may oras pa, doon na sa general Q&A. So, Gen Z in my title is a play of words that refers to GE, the one in capital letters, and Generation Z, the people born between 1996 and 2010. They're the second youngest generation between millennials and Generation Alpha. Gen Z identity has been shaped by the digital age, climate anxiety, a shifting financial landscape, and COVID-19. Taking the cue from your pre-registration questions, I would like to focus on this fascinating generation. Not only because not only because they're currently in my classes, but because my daughter is also one. He's also a Gen Z. If I'm to base my characterization of Gen Zs on my students' papers and my conversations with my own daughter and her friends, we are talking to a generation in despair. They see the world as one of chaos and randomness, a world that might have reached the irreversible tipping point. Are we ready? We are not, my daughter says. The world is perishing as we speak. What is the point? What are we getting ready for? Gets me to thinking, what is our role as teachers then? Specifically for me, what is my role as a humanities teacher teaching disaster risk management as GE to Gen Zs? I have no ready answers, only more questions. In behalf of the DRMAPS team, what I'm about to present is not a pedagogical success story that will demonstrate a best practice, a term that itself needs unpacking, which I say over and over again. Best practice for whom and for what? We teach DRMAPS in a particular situation with a particular set of students coming from different disciplines and persuasions. I am not presenting a template, but a starting point for us to build on, modify, and tweak as we see fit. I start with a little history. DRMAPS was first taught as a CE10, civil engineering. DMAPS. You may notice that the R that stands for risk was not yet part of the course title. C10 was first taught during the academic year 2013 to 2014 by this group of teachers around the table. From engineering, you've already met Dr. Pacheco and Dr. Zarco. Not in the audience, I think, right now. Fine Arts, that's the former Dean of the College of Fine Arts, Dean Rosette, myself from Art Studies, Dr. Ke from Education Technology, and Dr. Mendoza from Psychology. We have been working and teaching together for a decade now. And through the years, the syllabus of the course and the teaching team evolve. As you can see in the portraits of superheroes in the background, you can see that, no? Courtesy of Dean Doy, by the way. Marami na kami ngayon. Nag-expand na rin ang list ng mga disiplina. And what you see on the screen is but a partial list because it keeps growing. From its inception to the present, DRMAPS has been and always will be a super GE course with faculty that spans and integrates all three disciplinal domains: arts and humanities, science and technology, and social sciences and philosophy. Anchored on the collaborative, as Dr. Pacheco described a while ago, collaborative, proactive, and participative principles of disaster risk management, or DRRM. Sorry. The change in course title makes explicit the reference to risk or banta. Hindi pa nangyayari. Nasisignal nito more clearly that we anticipate undesirable events before they occur, and by the ways with which we can reduce the adverse effects to life and property, as the definition of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk, or the UNDRR states, the concept of disaster risk is anticipative of potential loss in a specific period of time and a particular system, society, or community's exposure, vulnerability to, and capacity to recover or perhaps overcome certain hazards. Gen Zs think that if risk is ever present, that's my daughter, and that we cannot control them, why bother? We redirect them, or we redirect our students and the ones we come in contact with in day-to-day life, especially in this household, by pointing out that with knowledge of the prevailing hazards and the patterns of population and socioeconomic development, disaster risks can be assessed and mapped in broad terms at least, and that instead of such knee-jerk apocalyptic attitude, we encourage them to consider the social and economic context in which disaster risks occur. And it may do them well to get out of their digital bubbles, to understand other people around them and their perceptions of risk and their underlying risk factors. So we frame and approach this proactive and participatory philosophy through three intersecting perspectives. Perhaps the most unique contribution of DRMAPS to the teaching of DRRM, the psychosocial perspective, which zooms into personal and cultural perceptions on how we perceive risks and how we act according to those perceptions. The socio-political, partly explained kanina by Dr. Pacheco, which zeroes in on the human and societal arrangements and conventions, including governance, laws, and accountabilities. And perhaps the most baffling and most challenging, the eco-critical perspective, which aims to surface our deeply ingrained views on the whole ecosystem and our relationship to the external world. All right. In the interest of time, I don't have much time. No, I will go through these perspectives with a case study, one that will demonstrate the other key terms of DRMAPs that are most associated with readiness or preparedness. Oh, sorry. Please read the case study with me. Pepe and Pilar bought a dream house in a location with a breathtaking view of the mountains. However, after they moved to the dream house, they were told by the barangay captain, the socio-political player in this scenario, that experts from the Mines and Sciences Bureau have identified the slope behind their house as to be being prone to failure, or in other words, to landslides. They were presented with the following options: to adapt by changing their behavior and their lifestyle, choosing to avoid the risk completely by exploring another location. The Twin Lakes project, located just outside Tagaytay, which has an equally beautiful view of the mountains, including Taal Lake and Taal Volcano. The selling point is that Taal Volcano only erupts within 50 to 60 years. Of course, it has erupted several times in recent years. But based on FIVOX hazard map, Lakes is just outside the danger zone. The Twin Lakes is adjacent to many slopes. However, this does not pose a risk related to landslide because the developer, another key player, constructed massive retaining walls to keep the slopes stable. Pepe and Pilar explored the option further by thinking of building a retaining wall next to their own prospective property. This strategy modifies the environment to lessen or mitigate the impact of a possible landslide. This option, however, is beyond Pepe and Pilar's budget. So we have an economic aspect, no, to the decision making. The third one is you seek a cheaper alternative. And Pepe and Pilar were advised by a geologist working, an expert player, and of course, one of my co-resource person later, working in the Mines and Sciences Bureau to install an early warning system. This option involves a preparedness strategy, remaining vigilant and prepared using knowledge/building capacities to anticipate the effects of hazards or disasters. However, the geologist warns that an early warning system is only 50% reliable. And with thus give a warning, this will give them this will only enough time to escape with full personal belongings, if at all. Sometime later, Pepe and Pilar were advised, when funds are available, to excavate the portion of a hill next to their dream house and use the material that had been excavated as engineering fill elsewhere. This strategy aims to prevent a disaster from happening. Excavating or eliminating the entire slope takes away the hazard risk and thus puts the probability of disaster from a landslide to zero or almost zero. However, they realize that doing so will deforest a large portion of the hill, which will affect the ecosystem as well as make the surrounding houses vulnerable to landslide. Also, as Dr. Pacheco points out in earlier conversations, complete removal of a hazard may be easier said than done. Excavation of the whole slope could also create or lead to other hazards. How will Pepe and Pilar decide given these options? From the socio-political perspective, Pepe and Pilar are made aware of laws and their accountabilities. As told in the story, they can also consult experts to learn about how to make their dream house as safe as possible. They could also ask themselves how capable are the local government in carrying out measures for preparedness and recovery. In other words, this perspective deals with human arrangements and structures that will ensure that the principles are made operational through their actions. From the psychosocial perspective, much would depend on Pepe and Pilar's perception and assessment of the risks involved. This refers to their perceived risks and the level of danger they see from environmental cues and personal traits. They might be more daring than others and consider the risks acceptable or tolerable, especially weighed against the rewards of living in a dream house on a slope. They are more likely to take risks because of innate differences in the way their brains are wired, perhaps, or perhaps a function of their age and class, or how their characters and values were shaped in their families, schools, and communities. It doesn't always mean that if they perceive high risks, they will behave safely and vice versa. It is how much the risk they are willing to accept that determines whether they will be cautious or exhibit risky behavior. From the eco-critical perspective, Pepe and Pilar can be called upon to reflect on their dream house. Why does it have to be on the foot of a hill with a magnificent panoptic panoramic view of the landscape? Could it be that their view of nature is an anthropocentric position in the pastoral wilderness mode, one that revolves around the perception that of the more than human world as resources that are inert and without agency according to a mechanistic position, rather than as inherently valuable with an agency and will of their own, a position that is biocentric and organismic. Building a retaining wall or excavating a slope relies on technological solution in the cornucopian mode. It proceeds from the assumption that technological progress, the cornucopia of wealth, growth, and commodity production within capitalism can manage the landscape and control the environment. But what if we ask our students to think beyond themselves, beyond these defaults and our cultural scripts about being in control? Gen Zs are known for being hashtag woke. Perhaps we can also remind them that while we strive for social justice and equality for all, anything can happen. Buildings may fail, no matter how hard we try to make them as safe as possible. Mountains will shed their skins. The ground beneath us will move. Volcanoes will explode, whether we like it or not, and not according to our timetable. We take advantage of their wokeness by challenging their prior knowledge and positions from being human-centered with the view that humans are the center of the universe to that of humans as being a small part of an ecosystem, much like musical notes. We can only understand ourselves in relation to other notes as part of a melody or a chord. According to Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, we have a number of habits of thought that we do automatically. That's system one, which can minimize the amount of effort we need to expend when thinking through a problem, or serve as a defense mechanism or defense mechanisms that we resort to when our perception of reality does not agree with the facts of the actual situation. From the eco-critical perspective, System 1 thinking can refer to tropes, positions, and cultural scripts deeply ingrained in our habits of thought, feelings, and actions. They can also inform even our System 2 way of thinking, our methodical, deliberate inquiries and investigations of our world or into our world. Both slow and fast thinking have their place. Mitigation, adaptation, and preparedness require slow, deliberate thinking. Thinking fast is normally required in emergency situations, but also requires slow and deliberate thinking to lay the groundwork before, during, and after hazard events. In other words, System 1 and System 2 are not mutually exclusive. For example, when we accidentally touch hot objects, we have to think and respond fast. That's System 1. And the reaction can be physiological, as seen in the diagram. However, that fast thinking has been honed by System 2 when we reflected on our event and our response to it, and the knowledge or lessons we gained from that experience has been stored as a kind of muscle memory, internalized, or heuristics that involve physical gut reactions, goosebumps, butterflies in the stomach, quick reflex response. We mobilize these gut feelings to minimize the possible risk to our lives, our property, and the environment. The eco-critical perspective compels us to examine our System 1 habits of thought, or what we can also refer to as default thinking. Eco-criticism reminds us that humans are part of a bigger ecosystem. Coexisting with the environment and the more than human world involves an informed / evidence-based understanding of the rest of the ecosystem or environment. That's System 2. This is not always easy to do because our defaults, while useful in certain emergency situations, are also deeply ingrained and largely unconscious. All right. One of the pre-registration questions asks about how DRRM can be incorporated into art appreciation or even other courses and tracks. It's all about how we have time to watch this video?
Sige lang po.
Oo, but I don't know how to play it now. Hang on. Nakikita ninyo?
Nakikita po.
Okay.
There's a prevailing attitude that art doesn't matter in the real world. But the study of art can enhance our perception and our ability to translate to others what we see. Those skills are useful. Those skills can save lives. Doctors, nurses, and law enforcement agents can use painting, sculpture, and photography as tools to improve their visual acuity and communication skills, which are critical during investigations and emergencies. If you're treating an injury, investigating a crime scene, or trying to describe either of those things to a colleague, art can make you better at it. Here, imagine you're a seasoned cop or a dedicated doctor, but also imagine you're at a museum and let's look at a painting. René Magritte's Time Transfixed of 1938 depicts a mysterious and complex interior that invites analysis not unlike that required of a patient's symptoms or the scene of a crime. A miniature train, whose origin and destination are unknown, is emerging from a fireplace, and the smoke from the locomotive appears to flow up the chimney as if from the fire that is conspicuously absent below. The eeriness of the scene is echoed in the empty living room, enhanced by wood grain floors and decorative wall moldings to the right of the fireplace. Perched atop the mantelpiece are 2 candlesticks and a clock. Behind these objects is a large mirror that reveals an empty interior and only a partial reflection of the objects before it. The juxtaposition of the objects surrounding the moving train raises numerous questions for which there seem to be no apparent answers. Did I summarize the painting accurately or leave any details out? It's no big deal if you see something else in a painting, but what if we're both seasoned cops? I call you for backup, you show up, only to realize the 2 bank robbing ninjas I'd mentioned were actually 6 bank robbing ninjas with lasers. Close study of art can train viewers to study thoroughly, analyze the elements observed, articulate them succinctly, and formulate questions to address the seeming inconsistencies. Scrutinizing the details of an unfamiliar scene, in this case, the work of art, and accurately conveying any observable contradictions is a critically important skill for both people who look at X-rays and those who interrogate suspects. Let's interrogate this painting, shall we? Okay, Margriet, that's quite a little picture you've painted. But why aren't there any train tracks? Why no fire? What happened to the candles? Why doesn't the fireplace have a little tunnel for the train? It just comes straight through the wall. And the clock says it's about 1:45. But I'm not sure the light that comes through the window at an angle says it's just past noontime. What's this painting all about anyway? That's when you, my trusty partner, hold me back, then I leave. You get Margriet a cup of coffee and keep grilling him to see if this painting would hold up in court. Viewers can provide a more detailed and accurate description of a situation by articulating what is seen and what is not seen. This is particularly important in medicine. If an illness is evidenced by 3 symptoms and only 2 are present in a patient, a medical professional must explicitly state the absence of that 3rd symptom, signifying that the patient may not have the condition suspected. Articulating the absence of a specific detail or behavior, known as the pertinent negative, is as critical as stating the details and behaviors that are present in order to treat the patient. And conspicuous absences are only conspicuous to eyes trained to look for them. Art teaches professionals across a wide spectrum of fields not only how to ask more effective questions about what cannot be readily answered, but also, and more importantly, how to analyze complex real-world situations from a new and different perspective, ultimately solving difficult problems. Intense attention to detail, the ability to take a step back and look differently. We want first responders to have the analytical skills of master art historians at least. Art trains us to investigate, and that's a real-world skill if there ever was one.
Hindi na po ako makabalik sa aking balikan ko na lang po ulit. Oops, wala na. Dali lang po. Technical issues din. Lang po.
Habang hinihintay po natin si Ma'am May, ayusin niya kanyang slides, paalala na pwede kayong maglagay ng inyong mga tanong sa ating Q&A box. May mga ibang naglagay na ng mga tanong. Pipiliin natin ang ilan dito para
Yes.
ating open forum.
Okay. Pasensya na, hindi ko makita ngayon yung aking Ito yung isa sa mga risk. Okay. Alright. Medyo na ano po ako na humina po yung aking internet. So, allow me to catch up. Okay po. Sige. I think I saw it again. Alright. Nakikita na po nyo?
Opo, nakikita na po. Ay,
Ay,
nawala po.
nawala ulit. Ay, naku po.
Ma'am May,
Yes. Yes, yes.
yung slide po na nakita nyo kanina, GEC na po yung nagpo-project nun. Pwede po ba naming saluhin yung pag-project?
Okay, sige. Kayo na ang nagpe-present?
Opo, kung okay lang po yun sa inyo.
Okay na sa akin yon. Hanapin ko lang yung sarili kong file.
Sige po.
Okay, so nandito tayo sa slide na to ngayon. So, I can start by saying that the video presented shows how we can hone our system to powers of thought by sharpening our senses, our powers of observation, and keen attention to detail. This means going out into the real world, to danas and to dama, in very real terms, the world beyond our computers, because no one lives there. Art with its powerful resources can open up to the world and even help us in our daily lives, as this video tells us. Next slide, please. If the other two perspectives focus on how people perceive and respond to risks, how people make decisions and act according to societal arrangements, that eco-critical perspective goes even deeper and focuses on the why, compelling us and our Gen Zs to undergo a meta-cognitive process, reflect on the way they think and how the way they think makes them act and behave in certain ways. Next slide, please. How do we integrate all three perspectives? Naka-flash na ba? Hindi ko kasi makita. So, may I ask a little interaction with you? Pakitingnan yung slide na ito at saka yung picture about an Inquirer headline dated September 25, 2024. Paki-respond dito sa mga tanong na to by raising your hand or writing on the chat box. Sandali lang po yun. Just please indulge me a little bit. Ang mga tanong po, what does the photo and the caption tell you? How do we perceive the risk and respond to disaster after disaster? Are we ready? And what does the headline tell you? What are the defaults on the way our government officials and even us think? Sige po. Open na po. Meron na bang mga response? Show of hands. You may also use the Q&A section daw. Okay, there's an answer. They are resilient in flooding situations. And the reminder from the highest and focused on flood disruption, right? It shows that the Filipinos are resilient, ma'am. They find ways to survive even
Okay, so ano ba yung question? It shows that the Filipinos are resilient, ma'am. They find ways to survive even if our governments are not ready every year. A reminder from nature, increasing number and intensity. We see a picture after a hazard. So, ang ibig sabihin kasi ng resilience sa mga natutunan ko sa aking mga co-teachers sa DRMAPS, yun yung capacity to recover or quickly, no, after a hazard event. No? But you would see that meron tayong iba't ibang responses sa disaster events, no? Some of us, for some of us, it's very personal. We tend to say, oh, okay, this happens every so often naman, nasanay na tayo, ano? We take the best of every situation. But let us be careful with the term resilient. Kasi minsan gagamitin yan para sa atin, kahit na hindi capable ang ating gobyerno, hindi handa, okay naman, resilient tayo, ano? So, lagi yung sinasabi noon sa CNN and all the others, no? Pero nakikita rin natin na ang response ng kataas-taasan ay ano pa rin, ano? Higher flood walls, reforestation. Wala namang sama doon. Pero, yun ang sinasabi kong default reaction, ano? Make it a technological one. This year in, year out floodings, make it, instead of making it broader, and changing, or at least, target our cultural scripts, for instance, yes, we need flood walls, we need a more complex urban planning. Ang gulo kasi ng urban planning natin, no? So, hindi pa rin tayo ready year in and year out, no? So, yun ang ibig ko sabihin, ano? Yung mga default systems natin would even shape the way our officials behave and sort of not look at questions that are more, or solutions or responses that are more out of the box and imaginative. Knee-jerk yung reaction, no? Things that we already know. Yes, so I agree. Band-aid solutions, walang clear blueprints, inefficient yung solutions, etc., etc. And so, tayo mga Pilipino are forced to do something. Pero of course, this is not the way we live. So talaga dapat. And that makes our Gen Z people or Gen Z students despairing, no? Sabi, paulit-ulit, ganito gobyerno natin, ano na ngayon? And so they have become very cynical and very, hopeless as the years go by, no? So, just follow the leader, no? So, mismo mga leaders natin ay hindi natin nakikitaan ng mas imaginative, mas malawak na blueprint, band-aid solutions. Okay. Sige, John, next slide, please. So, ano yung punto, no? Yung ongoing DRMAPS experience, yung experience namin sa DRMAPS, sinasuggest that we urge our students to go beyond the default of tropes, of popular opinions, knee-jerk reactions, of fake news, rampant yan ngayon. This is the era of post-truth, towards courses of action that are proactive, reflexive, and informed. Bloom's taxonomy places creativity as the highest level of learning. To be creative is to know how to ask questions, gather relevant information, connect and synthesize this knowledge together through a process that balances logic, intuition, and affect, critically, reflexively, and systematically. Next slide, please. In retelling the story of the forest, for example, we communicate not only the correct science of forests, the ultimate aim is to change the way we think about forests. So, to return to my questions at the beginning, what is our role as teachers then? Specifically for me, what is my role as a humanities teacher teaching disaster risk management as GE to Gen Zens. And how do I incorporate this, for example, in my other courses and vice versa? Because I think that disaster risk management should not be ghettoized into one course, but already be mainstreamed into the other courses. Well, that's ideal, and it's a dream we aspire to. I submit that teaching DRMAPS is all about perspective, which could mean a particular view or lens. This is an aerial view. There is an aerial view from the Hazard Hunter app. Click your location and the app give you the hazards you are exposed to in more general, technical, and scientific terms. This is the bird's eye view, so to speak. There is a down-to-earth view, on the other hand, at ground level. Our students really have case studies and they do research at the start, no? But right now, we just do case study proposals, no? But what I'm saying is, we encourage them to go down to an earth view at ground level, at the level of the body and its capacity, not only to make sense of the world or make meanings in risk communication, but also to sense it, to hear more, to feel more, and see more. There is also the perspective beyond the surface, as the video showed us, one that needs more probing, questioning, interrogating, discovering, getting out of our comfort zones, of stepping back and seeing the world from various perspectives, upside down, perhaps, and see something we haven't seen before, or see something in ways we haven't thought of before. So, but like I said, we don't have all the answers, and I cannot share with you all the details of how we teach DRMAPS. Perhaps we can have those later on in the open forum. But we find ourselves chastened by the wide gap between our aspirations for our accomplished on their behalf, especially for this generation that is so woke and so alert and so awake, and that is why so despairing. So as far as the core principles on which DRMAPS in particular and the GE program in general, we have yet a long way to go. In an ideal world, the GE program would have undergone, or at least beginning to undergo, a systematic and appropriately framed evaluation. Again, a dream that we teaching service courses in the GE are dreaming of. Will we ourselves be set and harried by personal cares and professional concerns, especially in this season of extraordinary risks and uncertainties? Will we be able to narrow the gap between knowledge, thought, and action? So that's one question that I leave. No? How will we rise to this challenge? We present no best practice prescription, as I have said at the outset. Perhaps I can only offer my students hope and faith. And I freely borrow from and modify the words of a younger colleague here. Hope and faith in the promise of our practice, in our quest to initiate our students from despair towards the fullness of their potential and their unavoidably vexed, confused, and despairing agency, and coax them, urge them to think and act differently, hopefully, imaginatively, in what they describe as a world of randomness and chaos. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Ma'am May. DRMAPS for Gen Z. Hindi lang para sa mga estudyante, para sa ating mga anak at sa mga susunod na henerasyon. Magandang paalala na kailangan natin kilalanin kung sino ang ating mga estudyante. Kailangan ma-motivate ang mga mag-aaral na lumabas sa kanilang digital bubble at kilalanin ang komunidad at kanilang kalagayan. Napaalala sa atin na tulad ni Pepe at Pilar, hindi tayo kailangan maging biktima ng mga disasters. May mga iba't ibang options tayo na pwedeng kunin batay sa iba't ibang mga perspektiba. Kung si Pepe at Pilar ay kasama sa WOOC Gen Z, We can challenge Pepe and Pilar to be eco-critical and look beyond themselves and see themselves as part of a wider ecosystem. Hindi lang kaalaman ng ating binabahagi sa mga mag-aaral, mas mahalaga na matuto ang mga estudyante maging critical, magkaroon ng analytical skills, danas at dama sa mundo ng ating komunidad. Mahalagang tulay ang mga ito para may ugnay ang DRR sa iba't ibang mga disiplina katulad ng arts at iba pa, no? So go beyond our defaults, learn to ask questions, to be critical and create new ways of thinking. Tanong nga ni Ma'am May, we must continually challenge how do we bridge knowledge, thought, and action. Muli, maraming salamat, Ma'am May. Siguradong maganda magiging open forum natin mamaya. Okay. So magkakaroon muna tayo ng 5-minute health break. Papalabas lang ng video habang nagkakaroon tayo ng break. See you later.
Ehersisyo sa leeg at balikat. Ehersisyo sa kamay. Ehersisyo sa likod at legs. Ugaliing gawin itong mga ehersisyo kada 1 oras ng pagkakaupo. Ehersisyo sa leeg at balikat. Ehersisyo sa kamay. Ehersisyo sa likod at legs. Isang paalala mula sa OSHC.
Yan. Sana nakabalik na ang 700 mga kalahok sa ating webinar. Nakapag-stretching na. Sige. Para sa pangalawang paksa, ibabahagi ni Dr. Noelina T. Ramos ang kursong Geology 1 or Geol 1. Si Dr. Jenny is a professor at the University of the Philippines National Institute of Geological Sciences in Diliman, or UPNIGS, where she also serves as the director of the institute. She obtained her bachelor's and master's degree from UPNIGS and received her doctorate degree from Kyoto University, Japan in 2011. At UPNIGS, she established the Geomorphology and Active Tectonics Research, or GEAR Laboratory, whose research interests include understanding surface processes and landforms, assessment and susceptibility modeling of geological hazards, and exploring the various applications of GIS in the geosciences. She's currently involved in local and international research projects focusing on coastal hazards, active tectonics, karst geomorphology, and long-term relative sea level changes. In 2023, she received the National Research Council of the Philippines Achievement Award for her contributions to earth science research. Professor Jenny Ramos also serves as the National Scientific Member Representative of the Philippines in the International Association of Geomorphologists, or IAJ, and Assistant Editor of the Geoscience Letters Journal. Let's all welcome Dr. Jenny Ramos.
Maraming salamat po, Doc Alan, and a pleasant morning to everyone. I'm very pleased to be joining this esteemed panel this morning. Maraming salamat po sa GE Center sa opportunity to share with you yung aming mga teaching strategies sa Geology 1. Alright, so mag-share screen lang po ako. Okay. Ayan. Yan. So, I hope you're seeing my screen now. And ako po si Jenny. Ibang kwentuhan po yan. Bakit Jenny ang nickname ko? But please call me Jenny. I am a licensed geologist and I currently teach at the National Institute of Geological Sciences. So, today I am tasked to share a bit about Geology 1. But before we do that, so konting background lang po muna on the hazardscape. So siguro para sa ilan sa inyo medyo bago yung term, no? So introduce po natin mamaya ano ba ang kahulugan ng hazardscape and sa context ng mga hazards sa Philippines. And medyo napapressure ako pressure ako after Professor De Twins talk kasi I'm not a pedagogy expert, but I hope to share with you ano-ano yung mga strategies, mga approaches na nagagamit namin sa Geology 1 that I think can be effective tools, especially sa I think most of us here are educators, sa pagtuturo ninyo ng DRR or hazards in general. And I would like to end my presentation with a few key points. Also, I would like to request the participants to please go to slido.com. May mga konting questions lang pong akong inihanda para lang hindi kayo antukin sa presentation ko. So please go to slido.com and then just input the code LINANGAN 2024. Ayan, kasi yung first slide ko ay may tanong na ako agad. Quiz na agad. Alright. So, as I introduce the hazardscape of the Philippines, so syempre, i-reiterate lang po natin, i-review natin, ano-ano ba ang mga klase ng hazards. So, there's a variety of hazards as defined by the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Committee. And but of course, for this presentation, we'll focus on the physical ones, yung geological, and yung hydrometeorological hazards. So, if naka-log in po kayo sa slido.com, or if you're on mobile, you can just scan the QR code on the lower left to access yung ating question. So okay, so mamaya tingnan natin anong mga lumabas na. Ayan. So, active na po yung ating slido.com. Alright. So, saan ba nagmumula itong dami ng mga hazards, geological hazards ng bansa? So, we can see here different maps showing different exposures or susceptibilities to hazards. So, ito pong nasa kaliwa ay tinatawag na Tropical Cyclone Track Map. And kung mapapansin ninyo, so itong lahat ng may dots na blue, orange, yellow, and then yung mga lines, these are all tropical cyclone tracks from 1980 to 2005. So hindi pa kasama dito yung last decade. And from this period alone, so meron na tayong more than 1,000 tropical cyclones entering the Philippine area of responsibility. All right. So as PAGASA reported, or would often report, so there are 19, average of 19 to 20 tropical cyclones entering the Philippine area of responsibility every year. All right. So doon po sa 90 to 20 na yon, maybe 1/3, okay, ay nagla-landfall. So yung 1/3 na yon, that's roughly 6 to 9 or 6, 7 na tropical cyclones that make landfall and would cause devastating or devastating impacts sa iba't ibang mga lugar. So kung mapapansin niyo po dito sa map, halos hindi niyo na makita yung Pilipinas kasi nabaon na siya underneath these cyclone tracks, but may naaninag pa po tayong kaunti. So pwede tayong mag-magnify. May naaninag pa tayong kaunti, and some parts of Central Philippines and Mindanao Island. Now, on the middle map, we can see several dots again. And itong mga dots na to represent earthquakes. So yung mga kulay ng bilog naman po ay nag-i-indicate ng lalim nitong mga earthquakes na to. So makikita natin from this map na ang daming earthquakes na nangyayari sa Pilipinas. So hindi na nakapagtataka na maraming nangyayaring mga ground shaking or mga mga lindol sa Pilipinas, no? And then kung mapapansin niyo naman po, in terms of earthquakes, may mga certain areas na hindi ganon kadalas maapektuhan ng earthquake. So not entirely wala, pero mapapansin po natin na itong parte na to ng bansa, and this is Palawan, so makikita natin na mayroong paunti-unti na mga earthquakes, but hindi katulad ng the rest of the archipelago. Okay? So saan nagmumula or anong nagkukos nitong mga earthquakes na ito? So makikita niyo po dito sa mapa, maraming mga lines na pumapaloob at nagbabind or nagbabound sa Philippines. And itong mga lines na to ang tinatawag nating mga trenches. And then meron din po tayong mapapansin na mga linya pa sa loob ng Pilipinas. So itong mga kulay pula, itong mga kulay black, minsan nasa lupa sila, minsan offshore or nasa dagat. So all these contribute to the seismicity or earthquake occurrences in the Philippines. So sa dinami ng mga earthquake, sa dinami ng mga faults, whether onshore or offshore, so hindi nakapagtataka na marami tayong mga lindol. And then, dito naman po sa right-hand na map, so makikita naman natin yung distribution ng mga iba't ibang bulkan sa Pilipinas. So there are more than 100 identified by the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology. Pero yung makikita niyo po na darker pink, so yun yung tinatawag nating mga active volcanoes. So sa usapin po ng geology or sa usapin ng hazards, pag tinatawag natin na active or nilalagay natin yung description na active. So, ibig sabihin, may recent or may latest na paggalaw or may latest na process na nangyari doon sa or related doon sa feature na yon. So, for example, tinawag natin yung fault na active fault. So, ibig sabihin, may recent siya na paggalaw. Pag tinawag nating active ang isang bulkan, so meron siyang recent na pagsabog. And i-clarify ko lang din po na sa context ng geologic time or parang yung kalendaryo ng geology, pag sinabi nating recent ay nagsaspan po ito over 11,000 years ago. So ganun ka-recent, ang active sa geologic time. Okay? So, tingnan po natin kung may mga responses na dun sa ating Slido. Okay. So, ano po yung mga naaalala nyo na disaster? So, wala po akong idea ng age range ng mga participants ngayon. But, ano-ano yung naalala nyong disaster or may notable hazard kayo na ma-recall? Syempre, Philippine setting tayo. And let's see. Okay? So, maraming nag-respond ng earthquakes. So, marami ring nag-respond ng typhoons. Okay? So, merong drought, merong storm, merong volcanic eruptions, merong soil erosion. Interesting. Okay? Yes, COVID is a hazard. Or actually, yung latest World Risk Report sinasabi ay COVID is a crisis or is regarded as a crisis, yung mga pandemic events. And then fire, yes. All right. Okay, sige. Thank you po for your responses. So standby lang po tayo sa iba pang mga questions later on. Okay, so going back, now, as I mentioned, yung UNDRR defines different types of hazards. So yung iba po nabanggit niyo na, so merong mga environmental hazards, merong mga chemical hazards, so ito yung mga biochemical na disasters na nangyayari. But again, focus lang po muna tayo dito sa mga physical na hazards related to the earth or yung earth surface. Okay? So, may tinatawag po tayo mga geological or geophysical hazards. So, these include earthquakes, volcanic activity and emissions, landslides, and tsunamis. Okay? So, ito po yung mga processes na nag-o-originate from the inside of the earth or yung internal na processes sa earth. Ano-ano ba yung mga internal processes ng earth? So, meron tayong magma generation, meron tayong magmatism, merong pagbabangga ng mga bato. So yung mga pagbabangga na yun ng mga bato, ng crust, or ng lithosphere, ito yung nagpo-produce ng mga vibrations. And itong vibrations na yun, so sila yung nararamdaman natin as earthquakes. So shown here are just some of the notable, not necessarily damaging, pero mga strongest and notable hazards that have occurred in the country. So of course, there is the 1990 Luzon earthquake, which by far is the most damaging on plate or yung nasa on land na earthquake. So if magtataka kayo, bakit may on land? So, meron bang wala sa land? So, meron po kasing mga offshore. So, ito po yung nasa ilalim ng dagat. And there's an even more damaging earthquake at nag-produce siya ng tsunami. So, hindi ko na po yun discuss, but we have time sa open forum if you want to know more. And then, of course, for volcanic eruptions, we have been recognized globally. Ayan, very hindi siya magandang statement, pero it's a fact na we are being known globally because of the hazards, yung intensity and yung impact ng hazards sa Pilipinas. So every time nangyayari ang mga ito, so lagi tayong naalala ng mundo. Nalalagay na naman tayo sa world map because of these hazard occurrences and their impacts. So of course, yung 1991 Mount Pinatubo eruption was known globally because of the pyroclastic materials. So sa kapal at dami ng pyroclastic materials na inilabas ng Mount Pinatubo, it was able to lower the global temperature. Okay, so ganun kalaki ang impact niya, global temperature, by almost 0.5 degree Celsius. And then one of the, at least so far, ito pa rin yung worst natin na landslide occurrence. This occurred in Southern Leyte in 2006, yung Ginsa-Ugon landslide. This was in St. Bernard. And then we also have a variety of hydrometeorological and climate-related hazards. So for convenience, tatawagin ko na lang po silang HMCR hazards. Masyadong mahaba eh. But these are all the processes or phenomena hazards that are of atmospheric, hydrological, or oceanographic in nature. So these include processes na ina-associate natin with tropical cyclones. So since tayo ay nasa tropical region, ang tawag sa ating mga weather, itong mga cyclones ay tropical cyclones. But, and then, since they are sourced from the Pacific, West Pacific, so tropical cyclones ang tawag sa kanila. Now, those disturbances or those cyclones na nag-originate sa Atlantic Ocean, for example, and some like east part of the Pacific, hurricane, yung tawag nila. So you may have wondered, ano bang kaibahan ng typhoon tsaka hurricane? So it's just the source of the weather disturbance or saan nag-originate yung particular cyclone na yon. So also included in the HMCR hazards are floods, drought, heat waves, and cold spells, and of course, storm surges. And yung storm surges na to ay lumalala ng lumalala. So, maaring nabasa nyo na somewhere or paulit-ulit na rin po itong nafe-feature or nababanggit sa news na itong global warming na bigger, na smaller component of what we call climate change ay pinapalala niya ang impacts ng mga hazards na ito. So we all have these pre-existing or imminent hazards sa Pilipinas, and they are being worsened or they are being exacerbated by global warming. So for example, without sea level rise, so ganito yung impact ng storm surge sa atin. Okay? But now, with global warming and with an accelerated sea level rise, yung dating level ng tubig ay patataasin mo pa. So, ganun na yung nagiging impact or mas lalala ang impact ng mga storm surges. So, having said that, we can see here the 10 deadliest disasters in the Philippines. So we see here a variety of forms ng hazards. So may mga related sa earthquakes like itong mga tsunamis. A lot are related to tropical cyclones with even a tropical storm or typhoons or even super typhoons. Okay? And then meron ding mga volcanic eruptions. And of course, meron ding mga landslides. Okay? So makikita natin dito yung number of casualties. So mostly ay more than 1,000 deaths ang nagresulta po dito sa mga hazards na ito. Okay? Na kaya sila naging mga disasters. So, with that information, so we can now have an idea of the hazardscape of the Philippines. So ang hazardscape, siguro mahahalin tulad nyo siya sa landscape. Yan. So ano ang nakikita natin sa isang landscape? Landforms. Okay? So that define a particular terrain. So kapag hazardscape, so we can think na ano yung mga present na hazards sa isang area, and that will describe the hazardscape of that particular region. However, if you can see or if you can refer dito sa definition ng mga recent studies defining what a hazardscape is, so it not only describes the physical susceptibility of a place to various hazards, but also the vulnerability of human life. So kanina doon sa mga previous talks na banggit na ang mga disasters ay hindi lang related doon sa presence ng hazard. Ang risk ay nag-i-involve siya ng marami pang components or aspects ng isang lipunan. So kasama, syempre, importante dyan ng tao, ano yung kanyang political situation, ano yung kanyang socio-economic situation. So all these would describe the hazardscape of a certain region. Paano na with the such exposure to hazards, paano mag-adapt, ano yung mga coping capacities, okay? And again, I'd like to go back dun sa geological hazardscape. So while yung term itself na hazardscape is very broad, so magfo-focus lang po muna tayo dun sa geological aspect. But yeah, we can see here that yung statistics na magiging affected with the presence of all these hazards in the country. So our population as of 2020, so 109 million. Yung estimates ng 2024 is roughly 120 million. And then yung Region 4A has the highest population. And then yung population density is, of course, pinakamataas sa NCR. So that's why tayo ngayon na nasa NCR, if you are in NCR, laging may mga nagbabadya or lagi tayong nare-remind dito sa mga, dito sa the big ones or dun sa the big one. Okay? Didiscuss po natin yun maya-maya. So at this point, pwede tayong mag-reflect kasi we are in a DRR webinar, no? So, mag-reflect tayo. Nasaan kayo ngayon? Nasaang lugar kayo ngayon? Ano yung exposure ninyo? Can you or are you able to identify hazards that are present in your certain location? Yung susceptibility ninyo as individuals, yung susceptibility ng entire area. And then, ask yourselves, are you ready? Kung mangyari yung hazard na yon. So let's say if you're in a location now that is close to a river and yung area ninyo ay mababa at inaabot ng tubig, okay? So aware kayo sa exposure, aware kayo sa susceptibility, and kung mangyari man yon ay handa po ba kayo doon sa pangyayari na yon? Right? So having said that, so isipin nyo rin paano kayo mag-evacuate. Okay? So it's just a proper na we are in a DRR webinar. So kapag nagkaroon ng earthquake at this moment ay alam ba natin saan tayo pupunta? Alam ba natin kung paano tayo magre-react doon sa pangyayari na yun or doon sa phenomenon na yun? So, hindi na surprise sa atin. So sa mga previous slides ko na na-expose tayo at aware tayo na ang daming mga klase ng hazards, geological and HMCR hazards sa Philippines. So hindi na katakataka na yung Pilipinas remains most at risk or remains a country with the highest risk based on the World Risk Report. Okay? So sabi nga dito, Philippines is the world's riskiest country for a third straight year. And saan ang galing yun? So meron tayong tinatawag na World Risk Index or itong World Risk Report that is being released or issued every year. So merong mga groups of researchers and stakeholders na every year ginagawa nila to. Every year nagbabago ng focus kung paano nila i-measure yung risk. And then earlier during Doc Benny's introduction na bahagi na sa atin, paano ba na-measure ang risk? So andyan yung exposure mo dun sa hazard, nandyan na yung vulnerability. Ang vulnerability ay isa sa mga medyo mas complex na components ng pag-measure ng risk kasi nandyan yung coping capacity, meron kang adaptation. So paano po ba nasusukat yung mga yan? Pwede siyang demographic. mas marami ang babae, mas marami ang lalaki, mas marami ang senior citizens, mas marami ang bata, mas marami ba ang nakapag-aral hanggang high school, college. So yung levels of learning ay naka-incorporate din dun sa vulnerability. Alright? So, so ito po yung summary, kumbaga, paano na measure ang risk index ng bawat bansa. So itong World Risk Report assesses and evaluates itong risk index ng 193 UN-recognized countries. And sabi ko nga kanina, for the third straight year, ay number 1 tayo. So, palakpakan, hindi, biro lang. So, ganun tayo ka-competitive, no? Hindi sa magandang paraan, pero from 2022 to 2024, so we have ranked first dito sa World Risk Index. Okay? And nabanggit ko nga po kanina, every year, so at least since 2011, when the World Risk Reports have been issued, so lagi tayong nasa top 10. In fairness sa Pilipinas, lagi tayong nasa top 10. And in the past 3 years, so we have been consistent on the top, unfortunately. Yes, competitive, but hindi po magandang competition. So these are the focus areas nung past three World Risk Reports na nag-top tayo, nag-number 1 tayo. So in 2022, digitalization. So this is the first time na nag-top yung, naging number 1 ang Pilipinas. The following year, it was a measure on diversity. And this year, it's on the multiple crisis. So nabanggit ko nga po kanina, dito na papasok yung other, hindi lang siya focus sa geological hazards. So papasok po din po dito, paano tayo nag-react nung nagka-pandemic? Paano tayo nagre-react doon sa armed conflict? So ito yung mga ni-report or kinonsider na multiple crisis for this year's World Risk Report. So now I proceed. So I hope medyo nabigyan ko kayo ng overview ng hazardscape ng bansa. Now I proceed with some teaching strategies, learning tools, and assessment methods. So again, I would like to reiterate that I am no pedagogy expert, but this is I will share what I think has been effective in the many years that I have been teaching Geology 1. And I am also very happy and fortunate to have been part of DRMAPS. So yung DRMAPS ay nabuksan yung perspective, nabuksan yung pananaw ko sa iba't iba pang mga aspeto ng DRR. And I'm happy to say na itong mga natutunan ko sa DRR ay nagamit ko din to refine yung mga teaching strategies, yung mga assessment methods in teaching Geology 1 over the years. So, what is Geology 1? So, ang course title po ng Geology 1 as taught in the university is Our Dynamic Earth. So, it contains components of space all the way to the surface, giving focus or emphasis on these topics na tingin natin ay mukhang makakapukaw ng interes ng mga bata. Okay? So of course, ano bang interesting sa mga bata? Kapag sinabing scientist, gusto niya maging astronaut. Ayan. So kailangan merong component about space. So yun yung dito sa Earth's origin and internal processes. So it starts with the universe, zooming into the Earth's details. And then ano pa ba ang interesting sa mga bata? Depende kung sila ay generation ni Barney. So baka mahilig sila sa dinosaurs. Pero I think many kids are interested sa dinosaurs. So of course, there is a fossil chapter sa Dynamic Earth. And then yung chapters 3 and 4 or yung modules 3 or 4 are focused on hazards. Okay? And itong mga earth issues in general. So nadidiscuss sa Chapter 3, yung climate change, and Chapter 4, of course, would be about hazards. Alright? So, I'd like to share now in the next couple of slides, ano-ano yung mga na-apply ko sa class, and ano yung tingin kong nagiging na-appreciate ng mga students. So definitely yung mga hands-on activities. Anything that makes use of hands, literally. So gagawa sila ng map or magdo-drawing sila, gagawa sila ng mga uh, paper mache or gagawa sila ng globe, okay? Using a cutout, okay? So yun yung mga madaling ma-appreciate. So even just bringing well, not related sa DRR really, pero if magdadala ka ng something na nakikita nila and then you pass around sa class. So whether rock sample yan or if it's a fossil sample, yan. So students are more parang mas nakaka-focus sila sa pag may mga ganong meron silang nahawakan. Alright? So what's also helpful sa mga students is itong activity na to. So ipa-assignment niyo sa kanila. So punta silang class and dalhin nila yung kanilang go bag. Okay? So parang what's in a bag? I mean, anong i-share mo or ano yung pwedeng matutunan ng mga kaklase mo or even yourself as a teacher, baka naman meron siyang nilagay sa go bag niya na very practical, tas hindi mo naisip na ilagay dun sa go bag mo. Okay, so in that context, so please again go to slido.com and tingnan natin ano-ano ba yung nilalagay po ninyo sa inyong mga go bag or plano nyong ilagay sa inyong go bag. Yan. Sige, tingnan po natin ang mga sagot. Okay. So let's spend siguro a minute para makita natin ano po kaya yung ilalagay nyo sa inyong go bag. Ayan. Munggo. Interesting. Gusto ko tong munggo. Yan. Okay. Medicine kit, medical kits, first aid kit, flashlight, canned goods. Very, very important. Ito pong mga nilalagay ninyo. Chichirya. Mukhang takot po kayo magutom, ah. Okay. Sige. So, we can spend a few more seconds and then we can proceed. Ayan. So, yeah, halos, very, very thoughtful. Meron siyang pet food. And, magandang ano po ito, no, na syempre, lagi natin nakikita sa balita yan tuwing may pagbabaha, naiiwan yung ating mga fur babies. So, importante na iniisip din natin sila pag may mga ganitong emergency situations. Very important yung mga documents kasi if a disaster would really happen, we would expect na walang kuryente, okay? So there's no way, baka walang internet connection, okay, or yung mobile data ay hindi gagana. So it's very important to keep copies of your important documents, mga cards, mga IDs, all right? And place them in your go bags. All right. Okay, sige, pwede po natin tong balikan maya-maya. So magsagot lang po kayo anong mga maalala nyo pa. And then, balik na po tayo. Okay. And then, yan, map reading. So, marami pong nada-download na types of hazard maps. So, Hazard Hunter, nabanggit na po quite a number of times yung hazard hunter ng FIVOX. So, i-maximize at i-optimize po natin yung paggamit ng hazard hunter. Whether you are a private citizen or if you are an investor or if you are a policymaker. So, marami po tayong makukuhang impormasyon from these websites by our mandated agencies. So, for learning assessment, so sa digital age, sabi nga ni Ma'am May kanina, yung Gen Z, very adept sila at very techy. So, marami na silang tools na nagagamit, okay? And yung infographic is one of the simplest yet very informative ways na pwedeng nyong makuha makuha kung anong natutunan nila. Okay? Or ano yung key points or key takeaways na nakuha nila from a certain topic or from a certain lesson. So, not only na makukuha nyo yung insight nila, so lalabas din yung kanilang creative na juices, kumbaga. Okay, yung kanilang creativity ay nailalabas din dito sa ganitong mga very simple na outputs pero very informative and insightful. Okay? So tulad nito, nire-require natin na instead of just describing ano yung climate crisis, ano yung theory ng climate change, kailangan meron siyang call to action every time. So yung call to action, yung actually what I always look forward to sa kanilang mga presentations kasi hindi pwede yung mga generic na statements na reduce, reuse, recycle. So it has to be something that they're actually doing. Okay? So medyo tumatak po yung isang comment kanina na dito sa chat, yung pagiging aware at yung pagiging prepared natin as a community, as a society, it seems like theoretical lang siya. Okay? And it makes sense, actually valid, kasi yung nakikita nating systems minsan ay hindi naman nagpapakita na prepared talaga tayo or mindful or ang objective talaga natin is to reduce itong mga impacts ng mga iba't ibang hazards. Alright? So I guess it's just an issue of prioritizing the government's resources din. But I'd like to think na sana hindi lang maging theory, ma-put into practice din natin. And sa isang classroom setting, sana magawa natin yon. Okay? Isa yun sa mga duties natin as educators na i-instill sa ating mga estudyante na kailangan meron ka ring action. It may seem na maliit yung action mo sa totality, okay, ng situation, pero if ganun yung mindset natin, then walang mangyayari. Okay? So kailangan ma-encourage natin yung ating mga students na kahit maliit na step, okay, like magdadala siyang tumbler, okay, para ma-reduce yung single-use plastic niya. So, malaking bagay na yon. Kung ganun tayo lahat mag-isip na meron tayong mga small steps at we can do something, okay, eventually as a community. So, pagdating naman po sa hazard, so again, these are other infographics. So, merong very specific, like in this case, yung group na to or yung individual na to ay nakatira siya sa Green Hills. Okay? So, isa rin tong magandang activity na makaka-relate yung mga estudyante. So, let's say with the hazard hunter, you can easily identify ano yung mga hazards na present sa area ninyo. And then yung student, instead of hindi siya aware, ay malapit pala siya sa bulkan, ay malapit pala siya sa fault. So, na-compel sila na intindihin yung hazardscape doon sa area niya. And then meron ding mga pitch. And this is something that I've adopted and learned from teaching DRMAPS for quite some time. And really, isa to sa mga paborito kong activities sa whether sa Geol 1 or sa DRMAPS before, it's when students come up with ideas kung paano nila, yung sa tingin nila, anong strategy nila to be prepared or maybe reduce the risk of a particular hazard. Okay? So kunwari, halo-halo po itong mga outputs, pero this is from my last semester's outputs. Ang isa sa mga paborito ko dito ay itong app. Okay? So, magpe-present sila for 5 minutes. And then you acting as like an investor or a funding agency. So magbibigay sila ng ideas kung dun sa hinihingi nilang support. Oops. Okay? So this one they suggested or gumawa sila ng app, a mobile app. Okay? Gagawa pala sila. Hindi nila to ginawa. Pero ito yung proposal nila. Yung isa naman, these are medyo obvious to, but these are from engineering, from the College of Engineering. So they wanted to use this Rollo triangle to help reduce shaking sa buildings. And then meron namang mga soft skills. Like for example, ito gusto ko din to na ang suggestion nila is that high school, kailangan marunong na silang mag-first aid, mag-apply ng first aid. So meron silang first aid training for senior high school students. And other ideas. Like ito, it's a mesh that helps prevent yung very fine ash. Yan. So ash or soot or dust from entering your household. And then, itong si ideal mayor, ang gusto nilang mangyari is to directly communicate with the mayor na ganito yung hazard situation sa lugar nila. So, meron namang traditional, like a report. It's a technical report. Okay? So again, using the hazard hunter, so yung mga learning outcomes nila is to really understand. They're able to explain the mechanisms and impacts of hazards. And then yung number 2 is something na para ma-engage talaga sila doon sa activity, kailangan i-describe nila yung area of residence nila or some case study na nakaka-relate sila. And then recommend solutions for reducing the risk. Okay? So, yun po yung mga group projects, presentations, pwede ring individual, but based on feedback, yung mga students ngayon, they appreciate group projects kasi meron kang collaboration. I don't know, parang mas siguro yung mga bata ngayon, they're used to working by themselves or yung mga self-study. So, na-appreciate nila na nag-group project sila. So, every chapter, nagpapalit-palit sila ng group. So, in one semester, they will meet at least 4 new people dun sa group, dun sa class. Ayan. So, very, very appreciative sila dun sa mga group projects and collaborative work. So next is the use of technology and online tools. So for some siguro, especially dun sa mga hindi tech savvy sa atin, this can be boon or bane. Is it a challenge or an opportunity? Okay, so yung paggamit ng technology and online tools. But there is time to learn. So pero hindi naman kayo compelled na mag-embrace itong technology, but I'm saying na it's really helpful na you access these platforms na madaling makarelate yung mga students. Okay? So these are the tools that we have now in relation to hazards. Yeah, of course, yung hazard hunter. So if you click on your present location, so easily you can see now where I am now. I'm 1.5 kilometers away from the West Valley Fault System. Okay? So kaya very mindful, very aware ako na kapag nagkaroon ng ground shaking, saan ako pupunta? How would I react? Kasi yung office ko ngayon ay nasa basement and it's a hazard risk talaga. And in relation to that, so we often get this question, okay? And we're often presented this question sa social media, sa news. Are we really prepared for the big one? Or even the big ones? So, ang madalas na sensationalize or ang madalas na feature sa media is the big one that is related to this valley fault here na 1.5 kilometers away. Okay, so it's estimated to have around magnitude 7.2, and it's projected to cause several thousands of casualties and damaged buildings. So, kung um, if you wonder, saan nanggagaling itong anticipation natin? Ba't paulit-ulit na lang yung big one na to? It's because of this geological information. Alright? So, ang nakikita po natin dito is that this segment of the fault, the valley fault system, has a recurrence interval of 400 to 600 years. Meaning yung earthquake potential niya has a window na 400 to 600 years. So, ibig sabihin, kung may mangyaring earthquake ngayon, maghihintay ulit ng 400 to 600 years for the next almost similar earthquake to be generated by this fault. Okay? And now, bakit ganito yung anticipation natin sa the big one from this fault? It is because from historical data, the last notable earthquake that is presumed to be related to this fault was in 1645. Okay? So, kung 1645 plus 400, so palapit na tayo dun sa 400 na minimum dun sa window. So, kaya this is good na paulit-ulit siyang nabibring up. So, we are reminded na at least dito sa NCR and nearby areas, Laguna, Bulacan, na merong ganitong potential, yung valley fault, to generate an earthquake in the next several years or several tens of years. And going back to the question, so kanina nag-reflection time na tayo. So are we ready kung ano mang mga hazards na present? And well, there are certain people na nagsasabi na hindi. I think many of us here would probably share the same sentiment na parang hindi pa tayo ready for the big one. And other earthquakes that might occur. Kaya ako nilalagay na big ones kasi it's not only the valley fault system na close to the NCR or to Metro Manila. So there are also offshore faults na pwedeng mag-produce ng damaging impacts. So other tools aside from Hazard Hunter, so yung Hazard Hunter is a multi-hazard platform. And then this is a project by the DOST and the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, na it's a community-based, parang crowdsourcing of data. So it's a landslide inventory website. Okay? So pwede kayo kumuha ng information of a previous landslide. Pwede rin kayo mag-contribute kapag meron kayong na-notice na landslide sa areas ninyo. And then for coastal flooding and sea level rise, so this one is very useful to visualize yung mga sea level change scenarios or yung inundation scenarios. Okay? So let's say dito sa Metro Manila, if itataas natin yung water level by 2 meters, which is a conservative projection by 2100 based on sea level rise rates. So, ganyan yung may inundate. Alright? Now, if we exaggerate it to 4 meters, actually it's not really an exaggeration, pero the way things are going on right now, parang malalala at lalala lang talaga yung mga impacts. So with the 4-meter sea level rise, yan, so that would be the inundated level. Okay, so this is for sea level rise. And then yung good old Google Earth. Yan. So yung Google Earth, is a very powerful tool for landform assessment or mga land changes. Okay? So dito, i-skip lang natin. So there is a time-lapse function sa Google Earth. Okay? And we can see here na meron kang pwede kayong mag-demonstrate ng mga changes sa coastal areas. So let's say yung schools ninyo ay malapit sa coastal areas. That's very prone to coastal change. Nag-erode siya. Okay? So very powerful. Itong very simple yet powerful tool ang Google Earth. But of course, itong mga ganitong setup sa classroom requires an internet connection. Otherwise, you can always record your screen tulad nung pinapakita ko po ngayon. So, i-record nyo na lang siya if walang internet. And then, lastly, of course, ay yung field-based or experiential learning. So, hindi nyo naman po kailangan ng isang expert, or hindi naman expert, but like a professional like me, like a geologist, to teach some concepts in DRR. So as we've learned, hindi lang geological hazard ang DRR. It's a multi-component and a transdisciplinary na aspect. Okay, a transdisciplinary na pag-aaral. Okay? So, pero if you have, it would be interesting for your class, for example, na pwede kayong kumontak ng isang DRR practitioner sa inyo, a DRR personnel from your local DRRM unit. And kahit magkwento siya ng experience niya dealing with emergency situations or let's say disaster response. And of course, it's always very important. This is very time-consuming din and challenging for us na very busy, but it's very important to always update yung ating course content. So, may mga tanong dun sa pre-webinar questions like paano integrate yung DRR sa kanilang mga class. So, madalas tayong binabagyo. Okay? So, pwedeng doon natin i-inject na what if habang i-discuss natin yung tungkol sa pag-uulan, yung pagbabaha, mag-inject na tayo ng something about climate change that's been worsening etong mga floods. Okay? So, may mga volcano alerts from FIVOC. So, mag-inject tayo ng konting information about volcanism or yung how do we react doon sa situation na yun. So, in summary, the Philippines remains at high risk. So, this is a fact. Okay? And I have emphasized this in my presentation in the earlier slides na ang dami talagang hazard sa Pilipinas. And then we always start with preparedness. So reducing the risk of disasters, kailangan talaga na prepared and ready tayo. So sabi ko nga, we need to reflect kung gaano tayo ka-ready, gaano tayo ka-prepared. Are we just being theoretical about it, pero hindi tayo nag-act on it? Okay? So those are things na kailangan nating i-reflect. But of course, yung pagiging prepared at yung pag-reduce ng risk ay magmumula kung paano natin naiintindihan yung mga proseso na to. So, doon tayo papasok as educators, ay doon natin ipapaintindi doon sa mga students, doon sa community, kung paano nangyayari itong mga hazards na ito. Kasi kung hindi natin naiintindihan paano sila nangyayari, paano sila nakaka-impact, hindi rin magiging makabuluhan yung ating mga DRR initiatives. So lastly, integrating and communicating DRR concepts and activities in G courses is important in enhancing preparedness and reduction strategies. So final, how do we integrate DRR topics in our class subjects? So tuwing July, it's the National Disaster Resilience Month. So we can also make mga random na on this day topics. So pwedeng 20 minutes, 30 minutes ng class time. Magdi-discuss lang kayo na on this day nangyari yung ganito-ganito. And yun, current events and issues. So for our last question, so please go back to us sa ating Slido. Ayan. So, in relation to on this day, so it's hindi siya actually on this day, tomorrow, yan, will be the 11th anniversary of which of these notable hazards? Sige, tingnan natin. Hindi. Pakita natin ang results pag marami-rami na. Para walang may influence ang sagot. Okay. Sige, maybe we can wait for 30 responses. Ayaw na gumana. Ayan. Sige. Tingnan natin. Okay, okay. Ayan, okay. Sige. So, if excited na kayong malaman, ang tamang sagot po ay yehey. Ayan. So, dumami. Dumami yung Bohol earthquake. Okay, so congrats po sa 41% na nakatama. All right. Okay. So, hindi ko pala natanong kung nakikita niyo po ba yung screen ng Slido? I'm just assuming na nakikita siya. Nakikita. Okay. Thank you. All right. So that is all po for my talk. Maraming salamat po. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, maraming salamat, Dr. Jenny. Saka na lang natin pag-usapan kung bakit Jenny ang inyong pangalan. Nakita natin sa presentation ni Dr. Jenny, no, yung hazardscape. Halos binura ng mga tropical cyclone tracks ang Pilipinas at niyayanig ng mga lindol ng buong bansa, except Palawan. Sana all. We need deeper understanding para mas ma-engage ang mga estudyante gumamit ng mga physical, creative, problem-solving, and practical methods, group projects, technology, online apps, field-based and experiential learning, hindi lang observations ang gusto natin palabasin, kundi action na pwedeng gawin beyond the cliches. Buti lang bumalik tayo sa F2F. Mas marami tayong magagamit sa mga ito. No? Are we ready for the big ones? Mas maganda sigurong tanong, how can we be ready for the big ones? No? Sige, magkakaroon muli tayo ng 5-minute health break. Balik tayo after 5 minutes. Maraming salamat.
Aming serbisyo para sa inyo. Simple lamang po ang steps para rito. Una, magandang umaga po. Salamat po sa pagdalo sa ating Linangan 2024 webinar. Ang pagdalo sa aming webinar ay isang type ng transaction sa aming tanggapan. Hinihiling namin ang inyong pagtugon sa evaluation form upang mapagbuti po namin ang aming serbisyo para sa inyo. Simple lamang po ang steps para rito. Una, mangyari lamang po na pakiscan ang QR code o i-click ang link nito sa chat box ng ating webinar. Pwede nyo rin po i-type ang link sa inyong internet browser. Alinman po ang ginawa ninyo, dapat ay mapunta po kayo sa isang Google Form na may label na evaluation form kasabay ng bilang ng kasalukuyang webinar at petsa kung kailan ito ginanap. Pakibasa po ng mga directions sa bawat tanong. Lalo na po sa bahagi kung saan ninyo ilalagay ang inyong full name dahil what you type is what you get. At bago nyo po matapos ang evaluation form, makikita nyo po ang Client Satisfaction Measurement o CSM 2024. Mahalaga pong masagutan ito dahil hindi po matatapos ang evaluation form at hindi po kayo mabibigyan ng certificate kapag wala ito. Para sagutan ng CSM, pakiclick po ng link na nakalagay sa question. Pagkatapos po nito ay mapupunta kayo sa window na ito. Available din po sa wikang Filipino ang survey na ito. Kung hindi nyo naman po ito i-adjust, i-scroll down nyo na lamang po ang page para makita ang blue button na may arrow sa gawing kanan. Pakiclick po nito para mapunta sa next page. Nandito na po tayo ngayon sa transaction details. Para po rito, ang date of transaction ay ang petsa ngayong araw kung kailan ginaganap ang ating webinar. Piliin lamang po ito sa calendar. Ang office visited/transacted with naman ay Office of the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, General Education Center. Pwede nyo rin pong i-type na lamang ang GEC. Mahalaga pong piliin nyo ang tamang office dahil ang bawat tanggapan po ay may iba't ibang alok na serbisyo. Sa susunod na bahagi po ng survey, makikita nyo naman po ang Services Availed/Received at Transaction Type. Para po rito, ang Services Availed/Received ay number 6, Webinars and Other Activities Related to GE. Kaya po mahalaga na tiyaking GEC ang pinili ninyo sa Office Visited/Transacted with sa nakaraang section dahil hindi nyo po makikita ang option na ito kapag ibang office ang inilagay ninyo. Sunod po, pakipili ang online only sa transaction type. At kapag pumunta na po kayo sa susunod na dalawang bahagi ng survey, makikita nyo na po ang mga tanong para sa Citizens Charter. Tulad ng aming ipinakita bago magsimula ang webinar, ito po ang aming Citizens Charter. Pagkatapos po ng mga tanong para sa Citizens Charter, kailangan nyo rin pong sagutan ng mga tanong para sa Service Quality Criteria. Sundin na lamang po ang mga panuto sa mga sumusunod na tanong. Ngunit para naman po sa SQD number 5 na may pahayag na I paid a reasonable amount of fees for my transaction, mangyari lamang po ng pakisagutan nito na NA or not applicable dahil ang Linangan 2024 webinars po natin ay libre. Pagkatapos po ng mga tanong sa SQD, sunod nyo naman pong kailangan punan ang client information. Depende po sa inyong client type, maaaring mayroon pa po kayong isang maikling bahagi na kailangan sagutan. Pagkatapos po nito, may lalabas na window na may mensaheng, "We thank you for your time spent taking this survey. Your response has been recorded." Kuhaan niyo po ito ng litrato o screenshot. Ngayon, bumalik po tayo sa evaluation form ng Linangan 2024 webinar at i-upload po ang screenshot sa proof that you have answered the CSM 2024. Pindutin niyo lamang po ang Add File button para rito. Pagkatapos mag-upload ay submit na po ang form at marahang hintayin ang inyong Certificate of Participation. Maraming salamat po at kita-kits sa susunod na webinar.
Okay. Maraming salamat. Sana'y nakapag-break tayong lahat. Yan. Sana'y nakabalik na ang ating almost 750 participants. Sisimulan natin ang ating open forum. Invite ko po ang mga panelists. Kung nandiyan po ang lahat, no? Si Doc Benny, si Ma'am May, si Ma'am Jenny, para sagutin ang ilang mga katanungan. Siguro simulan na natin, ano, yung mga ilang, ano, namili lang ako ng mga ilang tanong dun sa question and answer, iba pa, no? So marami talagang tatanong, how can we make concepts less complicated and more relatable for students and the public, especially since these topics can be overwhelming, no? Napaka-technical kung minsan nakakatakot, ano? How do we use indigenous knowledge? Ano yung mga iba't ways to better simulate disasters? Baka meron kayong mga ilang additional ideas. Marami na po kayong na bahagi, pero baka meron pa kayong gustong idagdag dun sa mga nabahagi nyo na po. Kahit sino po ang gustong simula, magbahagi? Or Doc Benny, baka meron kayo gustong, sorry, Ma'am May?
I've been answering the questions on written. Pero yung dun sa indigenous knowledge, ang daming readings niya na binibigay kami on local knowledges, especially the relationship between communities and the modern human world. If you're going to give a trope to it, they are currently practicing, of course, nagkaroon na rin ng mga modifications, no? What we call as deep ecology. No? Ibig sabihin, yung pag-maintain sa harmony between the environment and themselves. And they look at the environment not just a resource, but their partner, no? Some live. Minsan pa nga, sa tingin nila, halimbawa yung isda, na seasonal na dumarating sa Batanes, tingin nila may agency of its own yung isda. So, yun yung pwede talagang pag-usapan when it comes to eco-criticism. Tapos, Sir Alan, meron din nag-question about Gen Z and how they can be mobilized. So, sinagot ko rin in writing na actually dahil sa sobrang woke at very alert ang mga Gen Z, we can even ask them, can have a discussion with them, paano sila mamobilize. But also, makikita rin na yung Gen Z kasi, sabi ko nga, immersed yan sa digital world, no? Maybe what they can do to focus or to target influencers, yung mga sikat ngayon na influencers, maaari silang, we cannot underestimate their influence. That's why they're called influencers. I forgot the name of the person, but there was one about, a comment on Palestine, for example. It generated a lot of responses. Ang sinasabi ko lang, yung sa generation ko, ng rally, hindi na effective yon sa Gen Z. Nandoon na talaga sila sa digital world. But they can also be called upon to go to the communities as Jenny observed kanina or Jenny shared. At yun din yung ginagawa rin namin sa DRMAPS. So yun, no? Ang sabihin lang natin, sila ay napaka-imaginative. We can ask them, of course.
Okay.
Ayun. Parang choppy. I seem
Naka-off
to
po
have
yung,
lost you.
opo, naka-off po yung mic ni Doc Benny.
Okay.
Tapos wala pong audio si Doc Alan for some reason. Hindi ko po siya marinig.
Ako rin, di ko rin marinig.
I was requesting our moderator na perhaps pwedeng ibato sa atin yung some of the questions sa chat because honestly, hindi ko ma-navigate yung chat board. In the meantime, na si our moderator as requested, I would like to volunteer a point kasi sa questions, nakikita ko yung isang tendency na we ask questions about what to do. Okay naman po yun. Pero sa DRMAPS, for example, we wish everyone goes back to what are we facing? Kasi may nabanggit si Ma'am May about go beyond the default or kaya hindi knee-jerk reaction. Hindi yung, may sinabing ganito yung dapat gawin, tama ba yun? We shouldn't go right there sa tama ba yung pinapagawa o enough ba yung ginagawa? Kasi in the first place, baka yung disaster risk assessment or yung appreciation, yung objective assessment is one thing. Subjective assessment is also another. Kailangan pa natin ng, well, assuming we have the time and we should use the time ahead of time, ika nga, A little bit more introspective na analysis. Hindi yung mali yung ginagawa ng gobyerno. Maybe mali nga, maybe tama nga, pero why do we start that way na we are reacting to the actions or reactions when we may not be on the same page sa appreciation kung ano talaga yung risk. And going back to risk, I wish we would unbundle yung kasing risk, nagpatong-patong na yung hazard, yung exposure, yung vulnerabilities. I think napakagandang handle na ina-unbundle natin yung risk factors. I learned this from my wife na medical doctor. They live every day by managing the risk factors. Meron kang diabetes, you cannot just say manage diabetes. You trace ano yung mga risk factors ng diabetes. Is it diet? Is it genetics? Is it lifestyle? And then you address each one. So sana yung pinaliwanag ni Ma'am Jenny na a deeper and true understanding of the hazards, we can always start there also. Before we ask ano gagawin natin sa baha, intindihin muna natin ano ba yung baha? Or ano gagawin natin in case of earthquake, intindihin muna natin kailan ba or ano ba yung earthquake so that we have realistic expectations about such. Ang haba na sinabi ko, no? Pero babalik ako dun sa let's not go straight to questioning, doubting, or accepting what to do. Let's go back to ano ba yung risk? Ano yung predominant risk factors? And we will be more informed, ika nga. But having said that, alam niyo naman yon, pinapaalala ko lang, di ba, Sir Prof. Vera? And this is a forum para remind ourselves na teachers don't know everything. And of course, students don't know everything. Pero the more we question what we know and what we don't know, the more we can be guided kung ano nga ba ang dapat gawin or to do. So I always go back to risk assessment muna bago actions. Say actions could be premature, actions could be ano yun? SOP, routine, and so we get frustrated. So ang haba ng pasakali ko, pero ano ba talagang tanong ng mga ating participants, Prof. Vera?
Opo, sorry, nakamute pala ako kanina, no? Pero tama po yung inyong nabanggit. Actually, marami sa mga tanong, mga what to do na kaagad, paano pwedeng gawin para ma-mitigate yung disaster, what do you do for this, what do you do for that. Pero tama yung nabanggit ninyo, no, na mukhang kailangan ng deeper understanding at baka nga yung binabanggit ng karamihan, pwedeng yung tanong na what to do, baka ito yung ating tanong na maaaring ibato sa mga estudyante. At yun yung gawing panimula sa engagement, sa discussion. No? Hindi kailangan tayo magsabi kung anong kailangan gawin. Pwedeng magkamali, pero yun yung ating gamiting plataforma para. Yun, maraming salamat. Ma'am Jenny, baka meron pa kayong gustong idagdag dun sa discussion na yon? How do you make that technical less complicated?
Mahirap po yan, no? Kasi yung mga processes po kasi are very technical in nature. But it helps kung meron pong mga examples and visuals. Yan. Kasi even personally, I'm a very graphic and visual person. So, kaya yun yung nata-translate ko din sa class na instead of text na very technical, magpapakita po ng examples or ng case studies. It also helps na may experience ako in doing such work. Kaya siguro it may be a challenge for some of our colleagues here na paano kung wala po kaming access to somebody na hindi naman talaga siya, very technical person. Pero sabi ko nga po, hindi naman necessarily geologist or parang DRRM professional talaga yung mahihingan niyo ng perspective. So, sabi ko nga po, even yung mga DRRM staff, personnel from your LGUs, they can share a lot. Okay? Na even myself ay hindi ko malalaman until makausap ko yung person na yun. So they have the first hand na experience dun sa area ninyo. sila yung may direct na dealings dun sa lahat nung mga situations dun sa area. So it's good kung meron po kayong maimbita ng mga ganun. And then as for jargon, I think we should also, well, this is a personal opinion, pero I think hindi naman po kailangan maging averse tayo with jargon. It's just a matter of explaining it properly. Yan. Kasi this is coming from a particular situation na because ina-avoid natin yung jargon na yon, people got confused with what the local government was actually asking them to do. Yan. So, since hindi natin tinuro yung storm surge or hindi natin na-clarify ano bang kaibahan ng storm surge, ano bang kaibahan ng tsunami, anong kaibahan niya sa daluyong, anong kaibahan niya sa alon. So, siguro to minimize yung mga ganong confusing na statement. So we stick to the jargon, pero just properly explain. And then kailangan i-reiterate lang siya ng i-reiterate para magkaroon ng ma-retain siya sa kamalayan ng mga estudyante.
Maraming salamat. No? So, merong isang comment dito sa question and answer. No? There should be a CHED-approved curriculum in DRRM kasi in reality raw, iba-ibang curriculum ng mga colleges and universities. Kung may mga comments po kayo tungkol doon?
And si Doc Benny, I think, will be
Yes,
the
Doc Lenny.
authority.
Hindi planted yon. Nabasa ko kasi yung question kaya sabi ko gusto kong sagutin.
Kayo pa lang naglagay.
No, hindi ako nagtanong pero nakita ko na dapat masagot. Because we have some experience sa academic affairs. Alam din natin yung GE curriculum kung paanong binago nung maging after K to 12. Palagay ko magandang ipunto na iba-iba nga yung mga GE offerings ng mga paaralan. Although merong minimum set na required. So nasa lengguwahe tayo na merong required GE, merong elective GE. I would like to answer in two ways. Palagay ko po doon sa mga required GE, pwede nating ihalo itong topic ng DRRM. Challenge yun dahil may initial syllabus, syempre, yung required GE courses. Second arena would be, di ba, meron po tayong mga elective GE. Sana ang DRRM ay magawa at least na elective GE. Sa Diliman po, you may know, sa UP Diliman, itong DRMAPS ay nagawang kapalit, halimbawa, or option, katapat ng Science, Technology, and Society. So may mga kurso na ito ay required dahil ang department nagdesisyon na ganoon. Meron namang kurso na ito ay option, piliin ng STS o itong DRMAPS. At meron naman na totally elective ito at may mga estudyante kumukuha. Kaya siguro po talagang bawat eskwelahan, iba-iba yung mga para-paraan para maisama ang DRRM sa curriculum. But I hope you find the ways to convince your administrations kung paano, without adding too many units to the curriculum, maisama ito o magawang option o maipalit sa ibang kurso. By the way, advertisement, si CHED po nag-budget or nagbigay ng pondo ng research nung dinedevelop namin yung unang version, itong DMAPS pa ang pangalan bago naging DRMAPS. Sa madaling salita, si CHED rin naman ay aware na itong DRRM ay maaaring maging isang tema ng isang kurso. So I think push lang po tayo. Malay nyo, CHED mismo magsabi na lahat na ngayon ng mga eskwelahan, DRRM na ang isang kurso. Malay nyo, we can push for it dahil open mind dyan ang CHED as far as we know. Dahil nga yung DRMAPS ay nagsimula sa isang proyekto ng course development supported by the CHED. Curriculum po, kailangan maipasok natin to para may lugar. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Doc Benny. Sana nga mangyari yung gano'n, no? A separate course talaga sa hindi lang sa UP Diliman, pati sa ibang mga universities. Pero marami rin dun sa mga nagtatanong, very specific. Gusto nilang hindi separate course. Gusto nilang talagang i-integrate sa kanilang mga kanya-kanyang GE courses like math, physical education, the languages. Baka meron kayong mga ilang ideas, paano nga kaya maipapasok dito, no? Kanina nabahagi na ni Ma'am May yung sa art studies, ano? Paano may incorporate ito? Doon sa iba kaya, meron kayong idea? Math, physical education, languages. Any thoughts? Sa amin, mas madali sa amin sa community development. Ang pagturo namin talagang pumunta kayo sa community at yan yung inyong engage sila, diba? Kung ano yung kanilang mga nakikitang hazards, ano yung mga vulnerabilities ba nila, paano nga ba napapasok. So may ganong klaseng pag-incorporate sa community development, ano yung ugnay ng disaster risk, ano. At siguro ibalik ko lang rin siguro doon dahil marami sa mga inyong naging payo ay specifically kay Ma'am May, no? Lumabas ah, ah, lumabas ang mga estudyante at pumunta sa fields na nabanggit rin yun ni Ma'am Jenny. Pero may tanong dun sa question and answer, how do you paano ba ma-address yung fear ng mga estudyante na pumunta sa field? Nandun pa yung tanong, ano, para sa atin, basic, punta kayo sa field. May takot nga, di ba? Mas lalo na marami ay nanggaling sa mga online courses. What do you do? Para magkaroon ng lakas ng loob ang Gen Z na lumabas at umalis sa kanilang digital bubble. Yes, Ma'am Jenny.
Siguro po, ang pinakamadaling sagot po dyan is i-require siya. Ayun, i-require. Kasi people fear what they don't know. And then, once na, nandun na sila, I'm sure they will appreciate the experience. Ayun. Whether negative or positive yung experience ay meron at meron silang matututunan. So, also, leading is teaching. So, if papupuntahin sila sa field, dapat kasama ka. Diba? Hindi pwedeng, ile-let loose ang mga sheep na walang shepherd. So, they should also, they will learn to appreciate it kapag may guidance. Yun naman yung siguro pwedeng generation gap ito. But what I noticed about about the students now is that very dependent sila sa guidance. I mean, kailangan, hindi naman siya spoon feeding, pero kailangan meron kang, meron kang building blocks, kumbaga, meron kang chunks na magli-lead sa kanila doon sa outcome or doon sa output na yon. So of course, they will be very afraid na pag ang instruction mo lang is mag-fieldwork kayo and learn something about DRR. So it doesn't work that way. Na kailangan may ano ka rin, may i-feed ka sa kanila and they will ask their own questions and then yun yung motivation nila to do the experiential learning or yung field-based na experience.
Salamat, Ma'am Jenny. Doc Benny?
Yes po. In fact, gusto ko lang yung makipiggyback. May nagko-comment, nagre-reply na rin at sasabihin ko dun sa paano maisama sa curriculum itong DRRM concepts or DRRM skills, DRRM values. Ang dagdag ko siguro ay talagang yung mga existing courses, hindi naman kinakailangan yung buong DRRM course, buong DRMAPS, buong Geol 1 ay isubsume natin. Pero marami pong opportunities to link up. For example, I could imagine yung mga great books or readings, you can pick a whole novel or a whole book, pero may chapter doon dealing with natural hazards and disasters. Art studies, I can imagine maraming eksena na ang setting ay relatable sa hindi lang to appreciate the art, but in fact to let your eyes be to see subtle observations about the environment, the ecology. So sabi nga ni Ma'am May, yung keen observational techniques na useful din naman sa objective appreciation ng hazards. And of course, sa mga science courses, whether geology man, kahit bio, there would be chapters or modules, I suppose, na pwedeng i-flip side natin. Biology or ecology is nature, and we study nature. The flip side of that is nature may pose some hazards. So siguro it's a matter of part by part, sana ma-link natin sa iba-ibang kurso. And in fact, hindi ba yung mga GE courses naman talaga dapat nag-i-interlink? So I think the answer is right there. Lahat ng courses mag-interlink, and some links could be towards the RRM. Siguro yan ang natural starts kasi mahirap mag-push ng separate course kaagad na DRRM. Pero since we have modules coming from full courses na Geol 1, DRMAPS, we can help each other share small modules na pwedeng i-interlock dun sa mga ibang courses. I'd be happy to share a module sa halimbawa, speech communication. Paano ba ipaliwanag, in person, making a speech, yung perceptions and reactions to hazards, etc. Alam ni Ma'am May yan kasi art studies talagang deployed dun sa ating kurso na DRMAPS. Alam din ni Ma'am Jenny yan na hindi lang hard science ang umpisahan natin sa hazard kasi even perception of geological processes kailangan equally maintindihan. I can go on and on, pero psychology man, understanding the self, baka may plug-in lesson or module tayong pwedeng mapagtulungan po. I say mapagtulungan dahil si Ma'am Jenny binavolunteer ko, si Ma'am May binavolunteer ko, may module na pwedeng ituro o i-share nila paano i-connecta sa ibang GE courses. That would be great kung mapag-connect po natin.
Yes po, Ma'am May.
Kanina ko pa pinag-iisipan yung math, no? Kasi hindi ako nakasagot kaagad kasi isa yun sa bagsak ko sa college. Ilang beses ko kinuha. And that's in UPLB, okay? Excuse me. Ang pagkaalam ko lang sa math, lalo na sa algebra, yung nahuhone yung ability mo to think in abstract terms, yung abstraction. So, kailangan yun para makita mo nga. Kasi when you do abstraction, you go beyond surface levels. I know 1 plus 1 is equals 2, but you can always ask, saan galing yung construct na 1 plus 1 is supposed to be 2? Alright? Mahaba ng usapin yun. Diba? And number 2, kung natatandaan ko yung sinasabi ni Dr. Nimenso Fidel about art, it can also be, or I think I read it somewhere, art itself is also, mathematics itself is also an art form in a way, no? Yung mga equations, yung mga convoluted na pag-iisip. That's what trains the gray matter to be more critical, I suppose, to be more reflexive, and at the same time to be more exact, but then going beyond surface experiences. Medyo mahirap ngayon, abstract ngayon, but it can be linked. It can be linked to, for example, how abstractions can also be applied in concrete terms into everyday life. Nakita naman natin doon sa video, right? The pertinent negative can be also applied to anywhere. So, ang challenge ko dun sa nagtanong, find out. Find out as well kung paano pa. Kasi hindi ako masyadong clear sa math. I only know it as a form of abstract reasoning and logical thinking. Ano pa ba?
May. Yes, Dr. Penny, may habol po kayo?
Sorry, ako po ba, Doc Allen?
Hindi, si Dr.
Okay.
Benny.
Magkatunog kayo, Benny and Jen.
Oo nga. Pero mukhang, yan. Dr. Benny, meron po kayong ihahabol?
Oo, tinatanggap ko lamang yung isang komento na kahit sa history, pwede natin i-connecta ito kasi maraming kasaysayan, meaning hindi fiction but historical, na ang backdrop ay mga natural events ng disasters and directly or indirectly ay nagiging factor para merong turn of history ka nga. So I suppose pwedeng mag-digress ng kaunti yung ating mga historical accounts. Instead of looking at the heroes of the days, of the times, pero balikan yung what was happening in fact as a backdrop doon sa, I would say, historical and maybe equally dramatic events. So I can imagine reteaching history and fishing out lahat ng backdrops doon na may kinalaman sa events na nasa scale ng either actual disaster or if not, impending and therefore risk. Kung gumagawa tayo ng pelikula, I'm sure maraming dramatization nun sa pelikula. Eh di sa history din, baka hindi lang nakaka-capture dahil hindi typical topic i-capture, pero malaki kaya yung effect. Halimbawa, nagkaroon ng Yolanda, how much of a political issue it became, di ba? Or kahit ngayon sa Amerika, dahil sa grabe yung dumarating sa nilang mga hurricanes ngayong election season, who knows what effect this may have in their national elections. So, in other words, I would imagine, hindi talaga mahihiwalay sa history pati itong mga events ng, well, disaster or mga threats ng risk. So, sa history pwede rin. And so on and on. I really hope na hanapin natin yung plug-in points. Marami dahil in real life, nangyayari naman talaga to.
Okay, maraming salamat.
Pahabol ako. Sige, pahabol. Nakita ko lang, hindi ko nagtatak din sa isip ko. Dapat daw may inclusion ng gender. Dahil wala akong time, hindi ko na discuss yung iba mga activities na may kinalaman sa gender. Pero pwede kasing i-link yan sa vulnerability. So for instance, maraming mga communities na hindi na allied, no? Persons with disabilities, for example, or nursing mothers, na may kakaiba silang vulnerability kasi when the time comes, paano sila magpe-prepare when they're nursing mothers, for example. In fact, yung case studies namin through the years and case studies proposal, ang daming lumabas na ganon. So in other words, you cannot get away from gender and class and race issues. In fact, it's also an ecological position, no? The socio-political position, and eco-feminist. Hindi ko lang na-explain masyado. And may nagsabi ethics. Of course, it's ethics. Ethics permeates disaster response, disaster readiness. Sinabi ko na nga, may mga communities na nawawala sa mapa dahil hindi nabibigyan ng karampatang atensyon. That's already ethics, part of ethics. And balikan ko lang yung sinabi kanina ni Doc Benny na talagang disaster risk reduction and management is really a multidisciplinary and multifunctional and multi-everything na course. So, dahil siya ay bahagi ng ating pang-araw-araw na buhay, palagay ko hindi naman ganun kahirap ang pag-incorporate sa ating mga courses. Secondly, yung kasama sa fieldwork kasi sa art studies ay yung cultural mapping. So, pag nag-mapping ka na, makikita mo sa isang specific place yung mga issues na sinasabi ninyo about gender, about income status, about age even, ano? Yung mga seniors are more vulnerable, etc. And even pets. Yun, minsan nakakalimutan yung pets, pero may mga project na ganun yung mga bata regarding pets. Okay? Sige, yun lang yung input ko doon sa mga questions na lumalabas sa chat.
Maraming salamat. Salamat, Doc May. Actually, yung aking katanong nga sana, how do you discuss vulnerabilities and exposure dun sa karamihan sa ating naging discussions kanina, no? Mas yung hazards. Maganda yung nasimulan nyo nga, pag-usapan ng gender. But how do you process that po, ma'am? How do you use that to find that, to enable deeper understanding ng disaster?
Okay, this is one example lang from one of my colleagues and from Dr. Zarco. So for example, one of our very deeply ingrained concepts about space is that an empty space is something that is empty. No, I mean it's not ideal. Gusto natin, of course, this is different from the haiku and the Japanese sense of space, no? Gusto natin na-fill up yung space. Then when we fill it up, we fill it with as many apartments as possible, as many malls as possible, etc. So concept of space yon. And then dahil walang pagplano doon, nagiging crowded at nagiging fire hazard, etc. That is what's happening, for example, in Cruz Naligas, if some people know about it. So anong ibig sabihin nun? Tagus na doon yung lahat. Economic situation, people live there because they don't have access to better housing, yung kanilang budget hindi enough. Mostly, ang nandoon din ay mga matatanda at mga kababaihang merong sariling mga kailangan, etc. No? So, yun ang sinasabi ko, Alan. Isang concept yon from art studies na po pwede ng lumawig, no? Space, and then material, and then construction, and then urban planning. Pupunta na doon, hanggang doon na lalawak na ng lalawak. That's just one example. There are many others. Okay.
Maraming salamat. Napakahalaga ng discussion kasi siguro yung knowing the vulnerabilities na naalala ko madalas ako pumunta sa Pagadian kung saan kaya nandun yata sa infographics ni Doc Jenny na number 1 disaster yung sa tsunami earthquake, pinakamaraming namatay dun sa mga nakatira, especially dun sa coastline, at hanggang ngayon nandun pa rin po sila. Hanggang ngayon alam nila na maraming namatay doon, alam nila yung risk. It's not as if they are not aware, and yet they are still there. And siguro ang hindi yung pagpapalalim ng hazard, but understand bakit nga ba sila nandoon pa rin.
Bakit? Oo.
Siguro yung sa pang tanong, how do you discuss human-induced hazards such as conflict in your
Si
classes?
Doc Benian.
More kasi, human-induced hazards are being experienced not only in the Philippines but in Asia, and yet most attention, funding, and even DRR discussions are geared towards natural hazards. Paano niyo po nadidiscuss yung mga human-induced hazards? Binolunteer po
Isa
yata
ako
kayo, Doc.
volunteer ng idea tungkol po
Pero
doon.
partner ko yan dyan sa module na yan.
Sa kurso ng DRMAPS, pinagtatalunan, focus ba tayo sa selected hazards dahil napakarami, hindi kaya i-cover lahat. So sometimes usually we use the label natural hazards muna. Kasama dyan yung geological, hydrometeorological, mga in-emphasize ni Ma'am Jenny. Pero the first at least one partly or largely human-induced hazard now we cover also in our course, yung fire hazard. Kasi parang patikim na some hazards are of course natural, partly human-induced. At magandang segue yon para tingnan na, okay, yung hazard pwedeng may human element. Of course, yung vulnerability, exposure and vulnerability, malaki din ang human element. So we deal with fire hazard as well. Tumigil lang kami to venture into biological hazards muna because that will take much more material to develop in the course. Samantalang yung fire hazard, dahil by nature ay coded na rin sa mga building code, medyo natural beginning. But time will come, kahit yung building code natin, pinag-uusapan na rin ng biological hazards, pathogens inside the building. So yung mga human-induced na whether to start a hazard or to spread a hazard, talaga naman po kailangan din i-connecta. Hindi lang ma-cover lahat in the same course. Meron nga kami mga student groups nagbo-volunteer na pwede pong pag-usapan yung mga physical threat na hazard in campus. Pwede rin. Pero marami pa yung ibang dimensions. Kaya inuuna muna natin yung natural hazards just because the science naman is well-founded, kagaya ng pinakita ni Ma'am Jenny. Pero fire is partly human-induced. And there are many other hazards na real, very real, and human-induced. Kaya, mahaba pala yung curriculum. Sorry, hindi lang pala 3 units dapat. Baka
6, 8, 9 units.
In units.
Dapat A and B. A and B.
Napakatotoo po fire as a human-induced. Unang beses ko pong naka-engage ng mga urban poor communities on DRR. Ang sabi nila, actually, ka-out daw nila ang DRR dahil merong loophole sa ating batas na pwede silang i-demolish, i-evict dahil nasa hazard zone daw sila, kaya ginagamit na dahilan yun para mapaalis sila. No?
See?
So, na-encounter ko na
Mm,
DRR,
mm.
usually positive, doon negative pala. No? So, ang daming trust building na kailangan mangyari para doon. Maraming
Yes, sir.
salamat
Yes,
sa...
sir. Malakas yung socio-political aspect. We should not
Yes.
na iba-iba ang dating sa iba't ibang tao at sektor. Akala nila yung solusyon,
Yes.
akala natin yung solusyon, sa kanila pala problema. So, maraming
Exactly.
perspektiba po. Ano?
Mhm. Mas maraming araw po ang natatakot, hindi dun sa hazard, pero dun sa reaction, dun sa response, dun
Demolish.
sa hazard. Ano?
Human-induced relocation daw is human-induced.
Yeah.
Kasi nga knee-jerk na nga yung reaction. Hindi
Yeah.
na nag-iisip. Hindi nagko-cultural mapping. Basta i-demolish kasi nasa danger zone. Hindi naghahanap ng iba pang paraan or iba pang anggulo. Yun.
Malapit na po matapos yung ating open forum, pero gusto kong isingit yung isang tanong dun sa pre-registration question. Ano? How do you take into consideration students with special needs or issues with their mental health when teaching DRRM? Masaya na, DRR ko minsan, naalala ko, tuturo ako ng community-based DRR. I talked about fire, tapos biglang at the end of the class, may lumapit sa akin, "Sir, sana po nag-trigger warning kayo, may trauma po ako sa fire." Oops. Parang, okay, how do you handle a DRR class? Tapos, ang dami na ngayong students ang may special needs. Any thoughts, any tips? Yes po, Sir
Okay.
Benny.
Pera ngayon lang ito naisip, pero isang matutulong natin transparency kasi yung syllabus natin naka-declare yon. Kaya nga mahirap magpasok ng kung ano-anong hazard off the cuff precisely kasi hindi handa. Pero kung nasa syllabus po yan, hindi sila magtataka. At kung sakali, sa kanilang manggagaling yung alert na, "Sir, hindi ako a-attend dito kasi..." Pero kaya nga po, tricky talaga. Tricky magpasok ng kahit na anong hazard, bigla-bigla, kasi yung kahandaan din ng audience, ng students, and who knows, baka tayo mismong faculty. Kaya I really believe na yung syllabus should be respected. Pinag-usapang mabuti at dineklara sa mga estudyante kung anong mga hazard ang haharapin. Baka lagyan natin ng multo, akala natin joke lang yon, pero traumatic pala talaga, hindi rin pwede, as you said. So, syllabus po, planado, kasi hindi pwedeng bato tayo ng bato na nakatatakot. Baka nga matakot lang sa halip na makapag-isip at makagawa.
Salamat. Ma'am May?
Meron kasi, I think nilagay rin namin to sa DRMAPS, pero sa syllabi ko, meron doong parang section on special needs. So kung kailangan nyo to, please come forward. Everything will be confidential. And then merong mga pwedeng mga professional help na pwede nilang puntahan. But mostly the teacher is the first line of defense. Pagka it has to do with management lang, na stress, etc. Pwede muna yung teacher. Pero pag hindi na pwede, hindi na kaya ng teacher, i-refer na. Meron naman tayong protocols doon. Ang tanong nga lang, gaano ka back up yung no? Yung ang daming backlog, in other words, parang kulang yung ating mental health professionals dito sa university para i-refer or para matugunan itong mga problema ng mga estudyante.
Salamat po. Ma'am Jenny, baka meron kayong thoughts dito? How do you handle students with special needs?
Hindi naman po siya particular sa GL 1 lang or DRR courses. So I guess in general, yung how we adjust din as educators to these students with special needs. So, ang isang in-extend ko sa mga students is yun, consultation. So, nabanggit nga po nung ating other resource speakers na very important yung transparency kasi we won't really know until you tell us. Okay, unless you tell us. So, mahirap mag-react to something na hindi mo naman siya naiintindihan or hindi ka informed. So, if students reach out, so dito na ngayon, dito na ngayon yung mga steps like pwedeng i-treat yung outputs or yung classes in small chunks na para mas makaano siya. I mean, hindi siya ma-overwhelm with too much information. So, pwedeng parang scaffolding in a sense sa pedagogy na you create these small pieces na eventually makakaproduce siya ng same output as everyone else. Of course, it requires a bit more time on the end of the educator, pero yun yung pwede nating i-extend na assistance dun sa student, especially kung nahihirapan silang mag-catch up with lessons and yung mga outputs. So, i-break down into digestible pieces, kumbaga, para hindi siya naiiwan.
Maraming salamat. Damadanas malasakit. Sige.
Pakikipagkapwa.
Pakikipagkapwa. Opo. Naalala ko lang kanina sa comment ni Doc Benny, mga multo lumabas yan sa hazard mapping sa amin. Ngayon meron kaming human-induced, natural at supernatural hazards na kailangan pag-usapan. Sige. Tapos na ang ating oras. Tama si
Excuse me.
Doc Benny ulit na baka nga hanggang alas 4 tayo dito para mapag-usapan lahat ng mga tanong, pero mukhang kailangan natin makat short. Baka invite ko po yung mga panelists na sagutin yung mga ilang mga tanong sa question and answer. Doon lang siguro ita-type. Pero at this point, pasok na ko po kay Ma'am Ana.
Maraming salamat po sa mahusay na pagpapadaloy, Sir Alan. Habang nakikinig ako sa inyong lahat kanina, this was what I contemplated on. Na we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And who are we? We are what we know, we are how we think, and we are how we react based on how we perceive things. In Sir Benny's opening remarks, he highlights the importance of GE in helping us be ready by shifting our perception from disaster mitigation to risk understanding and reduction. He calls us to equip ourselves and our students with the relevant knowledge, skills, and technical know-how. From May's presentation, we realize we are the same people, based on our knee-jerk reaction to hazards. She illustrates how GE can incite change in the next generation by teaching them to be conscious of how we perceive risks, how human and societal conventions affect us, and how we can be self-critical of the deeply ingrained ecological values that we have. All of which, of course, affect our instinctive responses to hazards. So as a professor from the Department of Art Studies, she invites us to use art to make students see things differently with a heightened attention to detail. From Ma'am Jenny's presentation, we are reminded that we are number 1 in the World Risk Index. Kaya talagang mahalaga ang inclusion ng DRR in the teaching of GE. She generously shared with us what has worked well for her so far in the teaching of Geology 1 and in raising awareness of the corollaries of the Philippine landscape. She tells us to anchor our activities in students' interests, to have hands-on collaborative projects, and use technological tools. So GE is a vehicle by which we teachers can kindle change among us Filipinos. If I may quote Ma'am May, I hope today's webinar leaves you inspired to narrow the gap between thought and challenge bilang mga guro ng pag-asa ng ating bayan. At dun po magtatapos ang ating webinar ngayong araw. Maraming salamat po sa ating mga speakers, sa ating mga participants. Ini-invite ko po silang to keep their cameras on para sa ating awarding of certificates. Picture taking pala po muna, pasensya na. And habang nagpi-picture taking po ang ating panel, nariyan na po ang evaluation link sa ating chat. Oh, want to smile. Thank you po. So this certificate of appreciation is awarded to Ma'am Claudette May Vidatuin for sharing her expertise as resource speaker in the webinar. Are you ready? The role of GE in disaster risk reduction and management of Linangan, the GE Faculty Development Extension Program, held today via Zoom and YouTube. Signed by yours truly, VC Vanessa Lusong Aizon and Chancellor Edgardo Carlo Vistan II. Marami pong salamat, Ma'am May.
Thank you
Ka-photo op
rin.
naman po with you. Marami pong salamat. Ang susunod po na Certificate of Appreciation ay para kay Ma'am Noelina Ramos, Ma'am Jenny, for sharing her expertise as resource speaker in the webinar. Are you ready? The role of GE in disaster risk reduction and management of Linangan, the GE Faculty Development Extension Program, held today via Zoom and YouTube. Again, signed by yours truly, by VC Venice and Chancellor Edgardo Carlo Vistan II. Picture lang po. Salamat po, Ma'am Jenny.
Thank you rin.
And lastly, para po sa ating tagapagdaloy, thank you, Sir Cesar Alan Vera. So this certificate of appreciation is for you as moderator in the webinar. Are you ready? The role of GE in disaster risk reduction and management. So held today, the 14th of October, via Zoom and YouTube. Again, signed by yours truly, by VC Venice and Chancellor Vistan II. Marami pong salamat. Thank you po. At higit sa lahat, salamat po sa VC Benny, kay Sir Benny Pacheco sa pagpapaunlak ng aming request na mag-open ang aming programa ngayon. Kasama po namin siya dito sa opisina ng GE Center. Ayan po, maraming salamat po, Sir Benny. At sa inyo pong lahat, sa pagsama sa amin ulit ngayong umaga, mangyari lamang pong paki-fill out ang evaluation form para makuha ang inyong certificate of participation. Narito po ang instructions. Kami po ay mananatili online. No? Ang aming staff ay maninatili online hanggang 1:00 ng hapon upang tulungan kayong mag-respond sa evaluation form. Yun lang po. Marami pong salamat at kita-kits po tayo sa susunod na Linangan webinar. Please stay updated via our Facebook page.
Ma'am Ana?
Yes po.
Yes, thank you ulit. May question lang po ako regarding the chat questions. Kung pwede po kaya silang mas-send din sa amin so that we can reply.
Yes
Kasi
po,
ang
definitely.
dami po so hirap mag-catch up. Pero will there be a way po na ma-share siya ulit doon sa participants?
Yes po, kasi we have their email addresses.
Sige po. Okay.
Thank
yes.
you.
So, we'll make sure po to answer your questions. Thank you po.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Jenny.
Magandang umaga po. Salamat po sa pagdalo sa ating Linangan 2024 webinar. Ang pagdalo sa aming webinar ay isang type ng transaction sa aming tanggapan. Hinihiling namin ang inyong pagtugon sa evaluation form upang mapagbuti po namin ang aming serbisyo para sa inyo. Simple lamang po ang steps para rito. Una, mangyari lamang po na pakiscan ang QR code o i-click ang link nito sa chat box ng ating webinar. Pwede nyo rin po i-type ang link sa inyong internet browser. Alinman po ang ginawa ninyo, dapat ay mapunta po kayo sa isang Google Form na may label na evaluation form kasabay ng bilang ng kasalukuyang webinar at petsa kung kailan ito ginanap. Pakibasa po ng mga directions sa bawat tanong. Lalo na po sa bahagi kung saan ninyo ilalagay ang inyong full name dahil what you type is what you get. At bago nyo po matapos ang evaluation form, makikita nyo po ang Client Satisfaction Measurement o CSM 2024. Mahalaga pong masagutan ito dahil hindi po matatapos ang evaluation form at hindi po kayo mabibigyan ng certificate kapag wala ito. Para sagutan ng CSM, pakiclick po ng link na nakalagay sa question. Pagkatapos po nito ay mapupunta kayo sa window na ito. Available din po sa wikang Filipino ang survey na ito. Kung hindi nyo naman po ito i-adjust, i-scroll down nyo na lamang po ang page para makita ang blue button na may arrow sa gawing kanan. Pakiclick po nito para mapunta sa next page. Nandito na po tayo ngayon sa transaction details. Para po rito, ang date of transaction ay ang petsa ngayong araw kung kailan ginaganap ang ating webinar. Piliin lamang po ito sa calendar. Ang office visited/transacted with naman ay Office of the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, General Education Center. Pwede nyo rin pong i-type na lamang ang GEC. Mahalaga pong piliin nyo ang tamang office dahil ang bawat tanggapan po ay may iba't ibang alok na serbisyo. Sa susunod na bahagi po ng survey, makikita nyo naman po ang Services Availed/Received at Transaction Type. Para po rito, ang Services Availed/Received ay number 6, Webinars and other activities related to GE. Kaya po mahalaga na tiyaking GEC ang pinili ninyo sa Office Visited/Transacted with sa nakaraang section dahil hindi nyo po makikita ang option na ito kapag ibang office ang inilagay ninyo. Sunod po, pakipili ang online only sa transaction type. At kapag pumunta na po kayo sa susunod na dalawang bahagi ng survey, makikita nyo na po ang mga tanong para sa Citizens Charter. Tulad ng aming ipinakita bago magsimula ang webinar, ito po ang aming Citizens Charter. Pagkatapos po ng mga tanong para sa Citizens Charter, kailangan nyo rin pong sagutan ng mga tanong para sa Service Quality Criteria. Sundin na lamang po ang mga panuto sa mga sumusunod na tanong. Ngunit para naman po sa SQD number 5 na may pahayag na I paid a reasonable amount of fees for my transaction, mangyari lamang po ng pakisagutan nito na NA or not applicable dahil ang Linangan 2024 webinars po natin ay libre. Pagkatapos po ng mga tanong sa SQD, sunod nyo naman pong kailangan punan ang client information. Depende po sa inyong client type, maaaring mayroon pa po kayong isang maikling bahagi na kailangan sagutan. Pagkatapos po nito, may lalabas na window na may mensaheng, "We thank you for your time spent taking this survey. Your response has been recorded." Kuhaan niyo po ito ng litrato o screenshot. Ngayon, bumalik po tayo sa evaluation form ng Linangan 2024 webinar at i-upload po ang screenshot sa proof that you have answered the CSM 2024. Pindutin niyo lamang po ang Add File button para rito. Pagkatapos mag-upload ay submit na po ang form at marahang hintayin ang inyong Certificate of Participation. Maraming salamat po at kita-kits sa susunod na webinar. Magandang umaga po. Salamat po sa pagdalo sa ating Linangan 2024 webinar. Ang pagdalo sa aming webinar ay isang type ng transaction sa aming tanggapan. Hinihiling namin ang inyong pagtugon sa evaluation form upang mapagbuti po namin ang aming serbisyo para sa inyo. Simple lamang po ang steps para rito. Una, mangyari lamang po na pakiscan ang QR code o i-click ang link nito sa chat box ng ating webinar. Pwede nyo rin po i-type ang link sa inyong internet browser. Alinman po ang ginawa ninyo, dapat ay mapunta po kayo sa isang Google Form na may label na evaluation form kasabay ng bilang ng kasalukuyang webinar at petsa kung kailan ito ginanap. Pakibasa po ng mga directions sa bawat tanong. Lalo na po sa bahagi kung saan ninyo ilalagay ang inyong full name dahil what you type is what you get. At bago nyo po matapos ang evaluation form, makikita nyo po ang Client Satisfaction Measurement o CSM 2024. Mahalaga pong masagutan ito dahil hindi po matatapos ang evaluation form at hindi po kayo mabibigyan ng certificate kapag wala ito. Para sagutan ng CSM, pakiclick po ng link na nakalagay sa question. Pagkatapos po nito ay mapupunta kayo sa window na ito. Available din po sa wikang Filipino ang survey na ito. Kung hindi nyo naman po ito i-adjust, i-scroll down nyo na lamang po ang page para makita ang blue button na may arrow sa gawing kanan. Pakiclick po nito para mapunta sa next page. Nandito na po tayo ngayon sa transaction details. Para po rito, ang date of transaction ay ang petsa ngayong araw kung kailan ginaganap ang ating webinar. Piliin lamang po ito sa calendar. Ang office visited/transacted with naman ay Office of the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, General Education Center. Pwede nyo rin pong i-type na lamang ang GEC. Mahalaga pong piliin nyo ang tamang office dahil ang bawat tanggapan po ay may iba't ibang alok na serbisyo. Sa susunod na bahagi po ng survey, makikita nyo naman po ang Services Availed/Received at Transaction Type. Para po rito, ang Services Availed/Received ay number 6, Webinars and Other Activities Related to GE. Kaya po mahalaga na tiyaking GEC ang pinili ninyo sa Office Visited/Transacted with sa nakaraang section dahil hindi nyo po makikita ang option na ito kapag ibang office ang inilagay ninyo. Sunod po, pakipili ang online only sa transaction type. At kapag pumunta na po kayo sa susunod na dalawang bahagi ng survey, makikita nyo na po ang mga tanong para sa Citizens Charter. Tulad ng aming ipinakita bago magsimula ang webinar, ito po ang aming Citizens Charter. Pagkatapos po ng mga tanong para sa Citizens Charter, kailangan nyo rin pong sagutan ng mga tanong para sa Service Quality Criteria. Sundin na lamang po ang mga panuto sa mga sumusunod na tanong. Ngunit para naman po sa SQD number 5 na may pahayag na I paid a reasonable amount of fees for my transaction, mangyari lamang po ng pakisagutan nito na NA or not applicable dahil ang Linangan 2024 webinars po natin ay libre. Pagkatapos po ng mga tanong sa SQD, sunod nyo naman pong kailangan punan ang client information. Depende po sa inyong client type, maaaring mayroon pa po kayong isang maikling bahagi na kailangan sagutan. Pagkatapos po nito, may lalabas na window na may mensaheng, "We thank you for your time spent taking this survey. Your response has been recorded." Kuhaan niyo po ito ng litrato o screenshot. Ngayon, bumalik po tayo sa evaluation form ng Linangan 2024 webinar at i-upload po ang screenshot sa proof that you have answered the CSM 2024. Pindutin niyo lamang po ang Add File button para rito. Pagkatapos mag-upload ay submit na po ang form at marahang hintayin ang inyong Certificate of Participation. Maraming salamat po at kita-kits sa susunod na webinar.
Good afternoon po sa lahat. Ma'am Ronaline, napansin ko lang po kanina pa po kayo naka-raise hand. May concern po ba tayo regarding sa evaluation form? Para po sa lahat, kung may concerns po tayo sa pag-accomplish na evaluation form, maaari nyo pong gamitin ang Q&A function ng Zoom or isend po inyong question sa ating comment section.
Good morning po, Participant Alma. Para po sa ibang tanong, naka-indicate na po siya sa ating direction. So, kailangan lang po talaga nating suriin yung questions para po masagot natin. Kasi hindi po kami pwedeng mag-indicate po talaga ng specific instructions. Maliban po dito sa SQD number 8, dahil ito po ay NA, dahil nga po libre yung ating webinar. So yun lang po yung magbibigay namin na instructions, pero the rest po, para po hindi po ma-intercept or ma-impluensyahan yung mga sagot ninyo sa ating CSM, kailangan nyo po talagang uh, suriin yung mga tanong. Maraming salamat po.
Ma'am Ronaldine Luchin, naka-raise hand pa rin po kayo. Inallow ko na po kayo ng access na mag-open ng mic. Otherwise po, i-lower po namin yung hand nyo kung wala na po kayong ibang concerns. Maraming salamat po.
Good afternoon po, Participant Evelyn na nagpadaan ng kanyang mensahe sa ating Q&A. Para po dun sa question ninyo, naka-flash na po sa ating screen itong proof of answering the CSM. So tama po kayo, may logo po siya ng UP. sa may gawing itaas sa gitna po, then meron pong katagang "We thank you for your time spent taking the survey. Your response has been recorded." Ito po yung kailangan ninyong i-upload dito po. Hello po ulit kay Ma'am Participant Olano. So, para po rito, pagkatapos yung pong mag-send at patapos yung pong ma-fill upan yung ating evaluation form, maghintay lang po tayo hanggang tomorrow kasi po, kailangan po namin yung oras para ma-validate po isa-isa yung mga sinendin yung CSM rules. Yun lang po, salamat po. Kay Participant Generine Calzada po, opo, salamat po sa pagdalo at pagsuporta sa ating linangan webinar. Walang anuman po, Participant Olano. Yes po, Participant Prixie, sige po, i-flash po natin. Ipi-play po muna natin yung video. Pero para po ngayon, ang office po natin ay GEC. So, makikita niyo po ito mamaya sa video. Magandang umaga po. Salamat po sa